Chapter 1054. Damn it. Aren't you accusing us wrongly? Who would want to come to your endless netherworld horizon? It was you who forced us out of the river Styx, and now it's us who are up to no good. Yu Qianqiu was speechless, but he couldn't figure out this legendary figure's temper, so he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. The two uneasy fellows looked at each other. The other had already admitted that he was the underworld general under the underworld emperor, the Red Armor Warrior. But what puzzled the two was that the other didn't know who Tsangyin Xian was. Didn't that mean that the other didn't know what happened in Twilight City? It seemed that the other didn't set up this checkpoint to target them. Yu Qianqiu immediately wanted to test him. He cupped his fists and bowed, saying, "I am Yu Qianqiu, the head of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. We are just passing through here on the river Styx. We definitely have no bad intentions. Please let us go, General." He wanted to see if the other had heard of him. If not, it would be easy to deal with him. The Red Armor Warrior snorted, "Even a nobody from the immortal world dares to come here. How dare you say you don't have bad intentions? Guards! Arrest them and interrogate them." The Red Armor Warriors surrounding the two immediately obeyed. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, saying, "Wait." The other party didn't know him, so he wasn't afraid. He took out a black token and showed it to the Red Armor Warrior, saying, "Who dares to touch me? Open your eyes and see what this is." Seeing him take out a fake Underworld Emperor's token, the corner of Tsangyin Xian's mouth twitched, but he naturally wouldn't expose it. Underworld Emperor's token. The Red Armor Warriors were moved when they saw the thing in his hand, and they were about to pay their respects. However, the Red Armor Warrior waved his hand to stop them. He stared at the token in Yu Qianqiu's hand and said disapprovingly, "I have followed the Underworld Emperor for so many years, and I have never heard of him giving the token to an outsider, let alone a small immortal world cultivator like you. Why do I feel that there is something wrong with this Underworld Emperor's token? The more I look at it, the more it looks like a fake." Tsangyin Xian's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This red-armored soldier was indeed a trusted subordinate of the Emperor of the Underworld. He could immediately tell that the token of the Emperor of the Underworld was fake. This was going to be a big problem. How could the other side let go of the person who faked the token of the Emperor of the Underworld? Greycloud Xian's right hand had already touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist, just in case. Bullshit. Yu Qianqiu almost panicked. He didn't expect the other party to say that. Although he had fooled Tsangyin Xian and Xinyu by saying that the token of the Underworld Emperor was fake in order to avoid their suspicion, he knew that the token of the Underworld Emperor was given to Yu Ji by the Saintess of the Underworld herself. It couldn't be fake. "General. You can't speak carelessly. This is the genuine token of the Emperor of the Netherworld. How can you fake it? You better look carefully before you speak. Otherwise, it will be a great disrespect to the Emperor of the Netherworld." Yu Qianqiu shouted. At this moment, Tsangyin Xian only wanted to say 5 words to him: stubborn. There's no need to argue whether it's real or fake. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand is real or fake. The red-armored soldier looked at him disdainfully and sneered. "Take the two of them away." "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu shouted. "You really don't know your place. Do you still want to resist?" The red-armored soldier's gaze turned cold. "We can go with you to verify whether it's real or fake." "What if it's real?" Yu Qianqiu was very confident. If the token in his hand was real, there was no need to be afraid. "You dare to bargain with me? You must be tired of living. If you have the real token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand, no one will dare to do anything to you. You can do whatever you want in the endless horizon." According to the red-armored soldier's temper, he wouldn't be so patient. He would have captured the two of them and interrogated them. However, he was here under orders to put on a show, so he couldn't do anything. "Okay." Yu Qianqiu shouted. "I'll go with you. I want to see who has the guts to distort the truth and say that the token in my hand is fake. Take them away." the red-armored soldier shouted. Wait! Yu Qianqiu tried to delay again. This time, the red-armored soldier's expression was really bad. No one dared to disobey him again and again. He immediately said in a deep voice, "What do you want again?" "I have a friend in the Netherworld River. I have to bring him along." Yu Qianqiu didn't care whether he agreed or not. He turned and shouted at the surface of the Netherworld River, "Jiu Yu, come out." Jiu Yu heard their conversation clearly from below. He flashed out of the Netherworld River with a pale face. He had no choice. There was a restriction on his body. He had to follow even if he didn't want to. Actually, Yu Qianqiu didn't want Xinyu to take the risk either. However, the green fire pearl had been planted in Xinyu's body. If the two of them were placed too far apart, it wouldn't be a problem for a short period of time. However, if the two of them were placed too far apart, they would immediately lose control and Xinyu would definitely die. He didn't know where the red-armored soldier would take them to verify the authenticity of the Netherworld Emperor's token. He decided to bring Jiu Yu along for the sake of safety. Just like that, the three of them were surrounded by the Purgatory Army and flew to the depths of the Netherworld River. Along the way, Greycloud Exian couldn't help but ask, "Yu Qianqiu, the token in your hand is obviously fake. You still dare to follow them? Once the matter is exposed, we will be trapped in the depths of the endless sea cliff. It will be even more difficult for us to escape. What are you trying to do?" "Don't worry. The quality of the Netherworld Emperor's token is very high. Unless it's the Netherworld Emperor himself, no one will be able to tell it's real. I don't believe that anyone would dare to attack someone with the Underworld Emperor's command medallion without knowing if it's real or fake. How about it?" "You can rest assured," Yu Qianqiu said confidently. "I hope so." Greycloud Exian could only sigh. He felt like he was stuck in a quagmire and couldn't get out of it. However, he had already made up his mind. Once he was at death's door and had nowhere to run, he would kill Yu Qianqiu first to avenge his grandson and himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to die in peace. After coming to the Netherworld, they had long heard of the endless sea cliff. Unfortunately, they didn't have the chance to see it. Even Jiu Yu only dared to look at it secretly from the Netherworld River. Now that they were overlooking the endless sea cliff from the sky, the three of them were still shocked and terrified. So this was the true face of the endless sea cliff. Scorching red molten lava continuously bubbled up from the ground like a spring, slowly flowing in all directions on the vast land. It was such a shocking scene. The lava field that was as wide as the sea was dyed red and had been rising for many years. Under the red mist, there were crisscrossing paths on the lava field like fields. Io. Io. The sorrowful and miserable voices of men and women mixed together and echoed endlessly. Countless men and women were completely naked, stepping on the scorching ground barefoot like slaves, working together to pull the huge iron chains on their shoulders and hands. The other end of the iron chains dragged something that looked like a sieve, filtering something that had gushed out of the ground along with the lava. There were many soldiers of the Purgatory Army in the surroundings who were holding long whips that were covered in thorns. Once they discovered someone slacking off, they would lash out with a "hoo" sound. Along with the laceration of flesh, miserable screams would resound. The slaves who had been whipped and were physically weak were immediately whipped into the boiling lava by the long whips. They wailed and screamed incessantly in the lava, and their bodies sank into the lava while emitting black smoke. A soldier in charge of law enforcement took out a wooling mirror and shone a beam of white light at the corpses that had sunk into the lava. Immediately, a ray of green light entered the mirror. This kind of scene could be seen at any time during the flight, causing Yu Qianqiu and the other two to feel their blood run cold. In the vast lava field, there were also hills and mountainous areas. When they flew over, they could see countless naked men and women mining in the open in the mountains. Similarly, they could also see soldiers carrying long whips mercilessly executing people. Miserable screams still lingered in their ears. What was even more eye-opening was that they could occasionally see neatly dressed women being dragged and thrown into the mountains by the Purgatory Army. It was obvious that they had just been caught after committing some crime. Once such women were thrown, the busy male slaves in the surroundings immediately stopped what they were doing and swarmed over. Amidst the women's screams, their ragged clothes were torn to shreds, and they were stripped in the blink of an eye. A group of dirty men were no different from beasts. They held down the fair-skinned women and rushed to rape them one after another. No one knew how long this would last. What was strange was that the purgatory soldiers, who were supposed to be strict in law enforcement, turned a deaf ear to them and allowed these men to do as they pleased. It inevitably made people feel that this was the time for these male slaves to rest. The unimaginable scenes they saw along the way made the three of them shudder with fear. The soldiers of the Purgatory Army did not treat the prisoners here as humans at all. In their eyes, they were no different from beasts and pigs. They endlessly tortured the prisoners using all kinds of strange methods, turning this place into a living purgatory that was too horrible to look at. One thing was obvious. Those naked slaves either had their cultivation sealed or had their cultivation crippled. They were forced to do all kinds of heavy labor with their pure physical strength. Also, the lava that emerged from the ground had a suppressive effect on meditation cultivators. It was easy to imagine the suffering they had to endure in such an environment. Shin Yu's uncomfortable expression as he flew in the air due to the high temperature. However, what made the three of them feel strange was that these purgatory soldiers were also meditation cultivators, but they did not seem to be affected by the lava at all. The three of them easily suspected that the red armor they were wearing could help them resist the torture of the lava. After flying for half a day, a towering mountain stood like a ferocious giant beast in the red light of the lava in the distance. Flying closer to take a look, the laborers at the foot of the mountain were as dense as ants. Clanking sounds could be heard incessantly, as if they were forging something. In between, the familiar sound of caltrops and whips could be heard incessantly, and screams could be heard one after another. There were countless caves on the mountain with red-armored soldiers going in and out. The whole mountain was like a nest of red ants. As the three of them were observing carefully, the red-armored soldier had already flown to the top of the mountain, where there was a magnificent palace. The others followed closely and landed on the square in front of the palace. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking around quietly, they saw a sea of red light and a red fog rising noisily into the sky, looking magnificent. The miserable screams that kept coming from the foot of the mountain allowed the three of them to understand the meaning of this endless horizon. They understood why the Netherworld's punishment grounds could cause the Netherworld's cultivators to keep quiet out of fear. Presumably, no one would be willing to be sent here. The red-armored soldier glanced at the three of them and then looked at the roof of the palace. The three of them couldn't help but look at the roof. They saw a man dressed like a scholar in white standing on the roof with his hands clasped behind his back and bare feet, motionless with his back to the people on the square and his face to the vast red lava world. The red light filled the sky, and his white robe fluttered in the wind. The three of them were stunned. Even though they had never seen the Emperor of the Underworld with their own eyes, they had heard that the Emperor of the Underworld liked to dress like a scholar in white for a long time. At this moment, they saw a scholar in white standing so leisurely on the roof of a palace in the endless horizon. It was self-evident what it meant. Could this man be the legendary supreme master of the underworld who rarely came out, the Emperor of the Underworld? The three of them felt short of breath. It felt unreal, and they didn't know if they were lucky or unlucky. Yu Qianqiu found that the back of this scholar in white was exactly the same as the back of the scholar he had seen in the wall sculpture in the underground palace in the Holy Land, where he had seen the saintess of the underworld for the first time. It was also the back of the scholar, as if the scholar in the wall sculpture had suddenly walked out of his mind. Under such circumstances, the three of them were certain without a doubt that this scholar in white with his back facing them was the underworld emperor who had awed the three realms, the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. Grey Cloud Xian and Yu Qianqiu suddenly remembered what the red-armored soldier had said earlier. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hands is real or fake. The two of them instantly felt bitter when they thought about it. So the person he had mentioned was the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. They had found the right person. Grey Cloud Xian and Shin Yu slowly turned their heads to look at Yu Qianqiu, their eyes filled with despair. The former even transmitted his voice to him resentfully, Yu Qianqiu. Play with me. Why don't you play with me anymore? You can't play with me anymore. The Emperor of the Underworld is here. No one can escape this time. This old man has been fooled by you. You haven't seen the Emperor of the Underworld. Maybe he just looks like the Emperor of the Underworld. Yu Qianqiu said with a last shred of hope. Bullsh *t. Grey Cloud Xian immediately said this to him. The red-armored soldier flashed to the roof of the palace, bowed to the scholar in white, and reported something. The people below couldn't hear a single word. This scene had undoubtedly extinguished the last shred of hope of Yu Qianqiu. Could there be another person in the endless horizon who could make the red-armored soldier bow to him respectfully? The scholar in white, who stood barefoot on the roof with his hands clasped behind his back, nodded slightly. The red-armored soldier immediately flashed back and stood in front of Yu Qianqiu. He said with a mocking expression, "I have found you someone who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Underworld is real or fake. Show him the token." Chapter 1055. Yu Qianqiu choked and was speechless. It was said that those who had nothing to lose were not afraid of those who wore shoes, and this was used to describe those ruffians. However, if they knew that there was a hard and sharp nail in front of them, which ruffian would still dare to step on it? Jiu Yu lowered his head sadly. He had been cautious all his life. A small mistake had caused him to be doomed eternally. He wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Sanyan Xian wanted to say something but stopped himself. He knew that it was meaningless for him to intervene. With Emperor of the Underworld by Qi here, he had no hope of protecting Yu Qianqiu. Back then, the sect master's 3-in-1 sword drawing technique could not deal with immortal Emperor Jin Tai, and Emperor of the Underworld by Qi was definitely not weaker than immortal Emperor Jin Tai. How could he deal with him? He could only take one step at a time. If he was really in a desperate situation, he could only fight with his life on the line. If he could escape, he would escape. If not, there was nothing he could do. After all, he had already come this far, and there was no way to retreat. The red-armored soldier crossed his arms in front of his chest, and the red chains wrapped around his body made an ear-piercing sound. He sneered and said, "Why? You don't dare to? You win." Yu Qianqiu said ruthlessly. He took out the Emperor of the Underworld's token and flew up to the roof of the palace. He had wanted to slip back to Utopia and run, but he thought that the Emperor of the Underworld's token was a genuine gift from the Saintess of the Underworld. He could take a gamble. The Emperor of the Underworld couldn't possibly kill him without saying a word, right? It wouldn't be too late to escape if he realized that something was wrong. It wasn't his style to cry until he saw the coffin. Yu Qianqiu flew up to the roof and stood behind the scholar. He held the Emperor of the Underworld's token with both hands and bowed respectfully. Yu Qianqiu of the Immortal World greets the Emperor of the Underworld. Taking advantage of his free time, he glanced down at the foot of the mountain. He realized that the scenery at the foot of the mountain from this angle really made him feel like he was the ruler of the world. Lowering his head, he saw the fair and bare feet standing on the roof slowly turn around without a speck of dust on them. He immediately understood that the Supreme of the Underworld was sizing him up. His heart immediately thumped non-stop, and many past events flashed through his mind. Yan Zicheng met Lu Chongqing, the head of the Ang Kuansung sect, and joined the Ang Kuansung sect. He became a small disciple who was ridiculed. Later, his master died, and he was framed. After experiencing a series of events, he escaped with his life. After hiding outside for a long time and experiencing some things, he joined the #1 sect in the cultivation world, Fuxian Island. He was expelled from the sect and was hunted by various sections. Then, he became the disciple of the #1 expert in the world, Bai Changchun, until he took charge of the demon domain and became the #1 expert in the human world. Finally, he founded the World Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. He had been through countless life and death situations along the way. In the past, he would never have dreamed that he would one day be able to stand face to face with the legendary Emperor of the Underworld in the Three Realms. He was able to achieve what he had today by walking step by step. He had experienced life and death so many times. What was there to be afraid of? He gritted his teeth and slowly raised his head to meet the gaze that was staring at him. What entered his eyes was a refined and handsome face with a slight smile. It was completely different from the sinister emperor of the underworld he had dreamed of. He couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Was this person really the emperor of the underworld who could make the three realms tremble? The scholar was also sizing up Yu Qianzhou carefully. He wanted to see what kind of person the saintess of the underworld was talking about was. When he saw that there was no trace of fear in the other party's eyes when he raised his head to look at him, he couldn't help but nod slightly in his heart. Indeed, there was something extraordinary about an extraordinary person. It was rare for a cultivator with the cultivation of a minor immortal to not be afraid when he saw him. What he didn't know was that Yu Qianzhou didn't even have the courage to raise his head to look at him. He only managed to raise his head after a torment in his heart. If he had looked at him with a murderous intent, it would be strange if Yu Qianzhou wasn't afraid. Perhaps he wouldn't even be able to see Yu Qianzhou's figure right now. Most importantly, he came with good intentions. That smile on his face was so harmless, and he looked refined and handsome. Women would rush up and kiss him when they saw him. Who would be afraid? Yu Qianzhou. This is the second time we've met. The scholar was the first to speak with a slight smile. It was the first time for Tsangyan Xian and Shen Yu to meet the emperor of the underworld. They didn't expect him to be such a handsome young man with such an amiable smile. It was truly beyond their expectations. Subconsciously, they felt a lot more at ease. Seeing that the emperor of the underworld had spoken, they couldn't hear a single word clearly. They guessed that there might be some sort of soundproofing barrier set up on the roof. The red-armored soldier was also stunned. He had never seen the emperor of the underworld being so amiable to a foreign cultivator, especially a celestial cultivator. Under normal circumstances, the emperor of the underworld would maintain at least some dignity in front of outsiders. He wouldn't act like this. Of course, based on his understanding of the emperor of the underworld, it would be a different story if he saw a beautiful woman. Yu Qianzhou's brain worked quickly. However, he was at a loss for a long time. He couldn't remember when he had seen the emperor of the underworld, who was renowned throughout the three realms. He had a splitting headache, but he still couldn't remember. His memory couldn't be that bad, right? How could he forget someone like the emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi? For a moment, he didn't know how to answer. The emperor of the underworld said that they had met before. Could he say that he remembered wrongly? This junior is ignorant. I really can't remember when I've seen you before. Yu Qianzhou said with a toothache. He was afraid that the emperor of the underworld was testing him. He also didn't know what the emperor of the underworld's temper was like. Was he a smiling tiger? He could only stiffen his neck and wait for the situation. The scholar smiled faintly and said, "That's true. I could see you in front of the dragon transformation gate. With your cultivation, you can't see me." Yu Qianzhou was speechless. So he was referring to that time. Suddenly, he felt the weight in his hands lighten. The emperor of the underworld's token had already floated to the emperor of the underworld's hand. His heart jumped, and he was prepared to escape at any time. Below, Tsangyan Xian and Shen Yu's expressions changed drastically. They were probably all done for this time. The scholar looked at the token over and over again and said faintly, "I personally carved the emperor of the underworld's token. There are only two sides. One side is on me, and I'm prepared to use it to pass down orders at any time. The other side is given to the underworld saintess for protection. When the underworld saintess told me that she gave the underworld's token to you, I was a little surprised." Yu Qianzhou was surprised. "Did the underworld saintess tell you that she gave the underworld's token to me?" No matter how he listened to it, he felt that something was wrong. The underworld saintess had obviously given the token to Yu Ji, and it had nothing to do with him. How could he not understand the words of an expert? The scholar nodded slightly and said, "She was trapped in the human world for a long time. She said that when she returned to the underworld, she realized that she was fated to meet you, so she gave this token to you. However, she didn't tell you that she gave you the token of the underworld. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He slowly tilted his head to look at the rising red fog, a puzzled expression on his face. He believed that the Emperor of the Underworld had no need to lie to him. However, why did the Underworld Saintess say something that distorted the truth? From what the scholar had said, it seemed that the Underworld Saintess had intentionally concealed the fact that he was from the human world. Could it be that she was trying to protect him? But why was that? Could it be that she had fallen in love with him at first sight? But it seemed that his current appearance was not good enough for a woman to fall in love with him at first sight. Not long after the Underworld Saintess told me this, Jintai suddenly came to the royal palace of the Underworld and asked me why I gave you the Underworld's token. The scholar immediately told Yu Qianqiu what he had told Jintai that day. This was the reason why he didn't care about his status as the Emperor of the Underworld and asked someone to trick Yu Qianqiu into meeting him. He wanted to let Yu Qianqiu know that he had helped him before, so that Yu Qianqiu would remember this big favor. What the hell were they doing? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head in confusion. He was no longer nervous, but he said with a wry smile, Emperor of the Underworld. This junior can't figure out why you helped me like this. It seems that this junior's ability is not worthy of your kindness. It's right that you can't figure it out. If I could figure it out, then I, the Emperor of the Underworld, would be too despicable to come here and curry favor with you. The scholar immediately laughed heartily. His thin white robe wrapped tightly around his body in the wind, giving him a feeling that he was floating in the air. He appeared to be exceptionally elegant and refined. This surprised Sangyin Xian, Jiu Yu, and the red-armored soldiers below, not knowing why the Emperor of the Underworld was so happy. He waved his hand disapprovingly, saying, You are too serious. It's not a kindness. Since the Underworld Saintess thinks so highly of you, how can I undermine her? Naturally, I have to do my best to help you. Otherwise, as an immortal, you dared to use my Underworld Emperor's token to show off outside, let alone help you block Jintai. Do you really think you can avoid my eyes and ears by hiding in the Underworld River? Once I give the order, how can the Water Tribe of the Underworld not give me face? If I want to deal with you, I can make it difficult for you to move an inch in the Underworld River at any time. If I want to catch you, it will be a piece of cake. Do you think you can hide until today? As he spoke, he laughed coldly and said, Actually, your movements in the Netherworld River have always been within my grasp. It's just a matter of time and place for me to catch you. Otherwise, why do you think the Purgatory Army coincidentally intercepted you in the Netherworld River? Do you really think you are catching a fugitive from the endless horizon? It's because I happened to come here for something. Thinking that the Underworld Saintess thinks so highly of you, I can't help but want to see why she thinks so highly of you. So, I asked the soldiers to intercept you and bring you here. Do you think I can see just anyone? Although what he said was half true, the domineering aura of the Supreme Emperor of the Underworld was undoubtedly revealed in his words. He behaved like an emperor, using both kindness and power. It was enough to fool Yu Qianqiu without his knowledge. Yu Qianqiu wouldn't expect that the Emperor of the Underworld came here on purpose for him. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu blushed with shame. He realized that the three of them had indeed thought too simply, thinking that they could avoid being caught by the Emperor of the Underworld by hiding in the water. Since the Emperor of the Underworld had been in charge of the Underworld for so many years, his relationship with the Water Tribe of the Underworld River was naturally not bad. If he, the Emperor of the Underworld, asked the Water Tribe of the Underworld River for him, how could they not give face to the Emperor of the Underworld for the sake of an insignificant celestial cultivator like him? It was guaranteed that a large group of people would surround and intercept him. I felt that there was something fishy about being intercepted in the Underworld River. So that's what happened. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and rubbed his nose. He cupped his hands and said, I wonder how the Emperor of the Underworld is going to deal with us now? If I really wanted to deal with you, I wouldn't be meeting you here. Zhang Jun would have already killed you. Based on Zhang Jun's ability, the 3-in-1 sword-drawing style of the Heartless Palace would not be able to stop him, unless Wang Qing himself used it. That Grey Cloud Xian is still not good enough. The scholar waved his hand and the token of the Emperor of the Underworld landed in Yu Qianshou's hand. He smiled faintly and said, "Since the Saintess has already given it to you, I have no reason to take it back. The Saintess has given you benefits, so I naturally can't be too stingy. In the future, you can use this token to come to the Underworld Royal Palace to see me at any time. I will allow you to use the token of the Emperor of the Underworld to solve any problems you encounter in the Underworld. What do you think? The benefits I have given you won't be any worse than the Saintess's, right?" Ah. Yu Qianshou was stunned. He had never dreamed that this would be the outcome. He didn't dare to believe that this was real. Could it be that there was such a thing as a free lunch in this world? He quickly calmed down. He didn't believe that there was such a good thing. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your favor, Emperor of the Underworld. What does Emperor of the Underworld need this junior to do?" With the scholar's insight and experience, he could naturally tell what Jiang Yi was thinking. He smiled coldly and said, "Do you think that I am making a deal with you? In the three realms, if I want to do something, I only need to say the word and someone will do it. If I want something, someone will naturally deliver it to me. Do you think that with your current ability, you are qualified to be ordered around by me? I am only helping you because I am happy. Don't think too highly of yourself. Damn it. You don't have to be so direct. You should at least give me some face." Yu Qianshou stood there awkwardly. When he thought about it, he felt that the scholar was right. The scholar didn't have anything he wanted, and his subordinates were as many as the clouds. He also had countless subordinates. Whatever he wanted to do, he could settle it with just a word. Yu Qianshou really wasn't qualified to be ordered around by the scholar. It seemed like he was indeed thinking too much. Seeing that Jiang Yi had already been convinced by him, the scholar felt it was funny. However, on the surface, he asked calmly, "Let me ask you. What are you doing here instead of cultivating and improving your own cultivation?" Yu Qianshou immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, this junior was forced to do so. Just as the Underworld Saintess said, this junior didn't know that this was the Underworld token. When I took it out, even I was shocked, thinking that I had gotten into trouble. To tell you the truth, Emperor of the Underworld, the few of us fled here for our lives." He wanted to say that he was here to collect information, but he reckoned that he wouldn't be able to fool the other party. He might as well just admit that he was a coward. "Humph. You are just an ignorant junior. I don't have time to waste on you." The scholar waved his hand and retracted the soundproof barrier. He then said calmly to the people below, "Zhan Jun. Let them go." After saying this, he disappeared from the roof. A streak of white light moved as fast as lightning, disappearing into the distant horizon in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1056. Seeing the Emperor of the Underworld fly away, Yu Qianshou felt depressed. He had wanted to strike while the iron was hot and form a relationship with the Emperor of the Underworld. Who would have thought that the Emperor of the Underworld would leave without any warning? Little did he know that the Emperor of the Underworld would shamelessly come here to express his goodwill. For someone who was used to being in a superior position, it was already very awkward. Although he still maintained his demeanor on the surface, he was extremely embarrassed and did not have the face to stay here any longer. Hearing that the Emperor of the Underworld would let them go, Zhangyan Xian and Xun Yu were overjoyed. They did not know what Yu Qianshou had said to the Emperor of the Underworld to let them pass safely. The red-armored soldier also looked at Yu Qianshou with a puzzled expression. He also wanted to know what the Emperor of the Underworld had said to Yu Qianshou, but it was not convenient for him to ask about the Emperor of the Underworld. He could only snort coldly and say, "You guys are lucky today. Get out." Yu Qianshou stood on the roof and looked at the red-armored soldier below. He still felt like he was dreaming. He did not expect to see the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, under such circumstances. He did not expect Bai Qi to reward him. It was too unexpected. Hearing Zhan Jun telling them to scram, Yu Qianshou looked towards the distance where the red light filled the sky. He casually took out his flying shuttle and jumped on it. Grey Cloud Xian and Shinyu understood his intention and flashed up. The three of them saluted the red-armored soldiers below. Afterwards, Ash Cloud Xian took over the flying shuttle without any complaints and quickly drove it away. Standing on the square above the sea of lava, the red-armored soldier looked in the direction they were going. His eyes were filled with confusion. He mumbled to himself, "They are going there. Did the Emperor of the Underworld give them a mission?" The flying shuttle flew across the sky. Below them was still the sea of lava. The screams from time to time could no longer attract the attention of the three people above. Sungin Xian stood at the front of the flying shuttle. After a while, he could not help but ask, "Yu Qianqiu, is the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hand real?" "Of course it's fake. But if the Underworld Emperor says it's real, then it's real." Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief and said, "It's all good now. We can use the endless horizon to directly enter the mysterious forbidden area. There shouldn't be any danger on this trip." This was not what Grey Cloud Xian wanted to hear. He was shocked to see the Underworld Emperor safe and sound. After a moment of silence, he asked again, "What did the Underworld Emperor tell you?" "Old song. This is related to the Emperor of the Underworld, so it's really inconvenient to divulge it." "Please excuse me," Yu Qianqiu said with a perfunctory chuckle. Grey Cloud Xian's face twitched, and he shut up. Shinyu sat alone at the back of the flying shuttle. He did not look too good, and he seemed to be in low spirits. It seemed that meditating was indeed not suitable for him to stay in the endless horizon. Even though they were flying in the sky far away from the ground, the temperature was still like a furnace, making him feel a little unbearable. However, this fellow had no human rights and could only endure it. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu discovered it in time. He asked Grey Cloud Xian to change his original flight path and fly horizontally above the Netherworld River Basin. They continued to fly along the Netherworld River Basin, which made Shinyu feel better. Time passed day by day as they flew endlessly. Yu Qianqiu was bored, and he would occasionally drop one of the silver balls he was playing with into the Nether River Basin below. As time passed, the two sides of the Netherworld River, which were sometimes wide and sometimes narrow, gradually drew closer. They could no longer see the vast and boundless water surface of the Netherworld River. Until one day, the sea of lava on both sides of the Netherworld River was suddenly left behind them. A cool breeze blew past them. Yu Qianqiu stood on the flying shuttle and waved his hands behind him as he cheered, "We've finally flown out of the endless horizon." Grey Cloud Xian's slightly tired face finally revealed a hint of relief. They had been flying at high speed for almost 2 months without stopping for a moment. Even though he had a high cultivation base, he still felt that it was a little too much. At the same time, he could not help but sigh. The vastness of the Netherworld had exceeded his expectations. Don't be too happy too early. There's at most 1 more month before the Celestial Emperor's wedding. Even if we return now, we won't make it in time. Qingyun Xian coldly looked at Yu Qianqiu and reminded him. In fact, he had already reminded him countless times along the way. However, Yu Qianqiu was determined to continue forward. Yu Qianqiu told him not to meddle in other people's business and said that he had a way to return in time. Grey Cloud Xian thought that Dijiu would not disregard his own life, so he waited to see how Dijiu would return in time. Hearing his words, Yu Qianqiu was about to repeat the same old story, but he saw Jiyu walking to the front of the flying shuttle in a daze. He inserted himself in front of Grey Cloud Xian, who was frowning, and slowly knelt down. He faced the cool night wind and began to cry. His tears flowed down his face. Yu Qianqiu walked forward and exchanged glances with Grey Cloud Xian. They both felt a little strange. Then, they heard Jiyu choking on his sobs and muttering to himself, "I'm back. After 150,000 years. I'm finally back." Although the voice was soft, the two of them could hear it clearly at such a close distance. Surprised, they couldn't help but look at their surroundings. The two sides of the Netherworld River were empty plains that were like the Gobi Desert. Not a single undulation could be seen, and the Netherworld River below them was at most 100 meters wide. Jiyu. You used to cultivate here? Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. Ji Yu was shocked and realized that he had lost his composure. He panicked and suddenly remembered something. He suddenly stood up and shouted at the two of them, "Slow down. Slow down, it's very dangerous here." Not only did he slow down, Grey Cloud Xian directly stopped the flying shuttle in the air. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Ji Yu. What's going on?" This area is the isolation zone between the Netherworld and the mysterious Forbidden Area. Don't think that it's peaceful here. In fact, it's full of danger. The invisible and mysterious power that can tear everything apart can appear in the air at any time. It's very powerful. Even the immortal Emperor of the Immortal World and the Netherworld Emperor of the Netherworld don't dare to trespass here. Ji Yu pointed at the Netherworld River in front and below. In this isolation zone, whether it's on land or in the water, even underground, there are no living creatures. It's because they can't survive the invisible and mysterious power. Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Xian looked at each other. No wonder no one dared to trespass the forbidden area of the Netherworld. It was because of this reason. However, the two of them had suspicions in their eyes. Yu Qianqiu touched his chin and sneered. "Ji Yu. Do you think the two of us are fools or idiots? Since no living creatures can survive here, why were you able to cultivate here in the past? You should be punished." Grey Cloud Xian stared at Ji Yu and shouted coldly. "Looks like we can't let him live anymore. Otherwise, who knows what traps are waiting for us ahead. After all, we're not familiar with this place at all." Yu Qianqiu frowned and looked at Ji Yu, but he didn't object. Ji Yu looked at the two of them and smiled bitterly. "I won't hide it from you now. Actually, you've misunderstood. This isn't the place where I cultivated in the past." As he said that, he raised his hand and pointed ahead along the Netherworld River. He sighed. "Follow this Netherworld River straight ahead. With Elder Tsang's flying speed, it won't take more than a day for you to see a waterfall that flows down from a tall mountain. I came down from that waterfall back then. As long as we cross that tall mountain, we'll reach the legendary forbidden area of the Netherworld. And I am from the so-called mysterious forbidden area of the Netherworld." Yu Qianqiu and Sungyin Xian were stunned. Both of them had suspected that this fellow was hiding some sort of secret, but none of them had imagined that this fellow's origins would be so strange. He was actually from the mysterious Netherworld forbidden area, and it was too inconceivable. Grey Cloud Xian's throat moved, and he said with some difficulty in a threatening tone, "You're not lying to us, are you? There's no need. I want to go back alive, so there's no need to lie to you." There was a trace of nostalgia hidden in Jiu Yu's lonely expression. He looked ahead and sighed faintly. "More than 1,000,000 years ago, I was born in a lake there. I was ignorant and carefree. Only after 500,000 years did my spiritual wisdom appear. Another 500,000 years later, I was lucky enough to find the way of cultivation. It only took me 50,000 years to cultivate to the early stage of Underworld Lord. Just when I broke through to the early stage of Netherworld Venerable, which was 150,000 years ago, I was suddenly possessed and wanted to see the outside world. Therefore, I followed the small river that connected the lake and finally stood on the waterfall. I hesitated for a long time, but in the end, I couldn't help but go with the flow. In the end, I came to the so-called Netherworld River. Who knew that the outside world was extremely dangerous? It was the first time I met the water tribe in the Netherworld River. They wanted to take my life because of a disagreement. I was so scared that I fled in a panic. I ran far away before I got out of danger. After that, I didn't want to stay outside anymore. I wanted to go back to where I left. But my fate was really full of misfortune. Every time I wanted to go back the way I came, I would always encounter some dangerous things. It was as if God was playing a joke on me. It worked every time. Not only did I fail to come back, but I was also getting further and further away from where I wanted to go. Just like that, I spent 150,000 years in the river Styx with nowhere to go. I thought that I would never be able to return in this lifetime. I left home so far away and experienced so many dangers. I no longer had the courage to return because I was too scared to try again. Until I met you too. It was the first time I had the courage to taste the flesh of a human in the immortal world. Who knew that I was as unlucky as ever? You know what happened next. I never dreamed that I would be able to come back here in this lifetime. There was such an unlucky guy in this world. Yu Qianqiu and Sungin Xian looked at each other. While they felt it was unbelievable, they also sighed for Ji Yu's fate. Sungin Xian looked ahead and asked with a frown, I don't know what's so mysterious about this netherworld forbidden land. Ji Yu. What's in the forbidden land? This. Ji Yu hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly. I didn't think that place was mysterious before, but after coming out and getting in touch with the outside world, I realized that it's a place far away from the three realms. There were quite a few tombs scattered about. If one were to ask whose tombs they were, using the language of the three realms, those tombs were the tombs of gods. Dead gods were buried there. The so-called forbidden land of the netherworld is actually a vast mausoleum of the gods. Chapter 1057. The Tomb of the God of Sin. Yu Qianqiu and Sungin Xian exclaimed in unison. Their eyes were wide open and they almost spat out their tongues. They had all kinds of speculations about the forbidden land of the underworld, but they never dreamed that the so-called mysterious forbidden land was actually the mausoleum of the god of sin, the resting place of the dead gods. Don't be surprised. It's really the mausoleum of the god of sin, I didn't lie to you, Shen Yu assured them again. The two of them didn't think that Shen Yu was lying to them, they just thought it was too unbelievable. After digesting this shocking news, Yu Qianqiu stared at him with sparkling eyes and asked in a deep voice, from what you said, you seem to have a way to pass through this dangerous isolation zone and return to the forbidden area? Yes. Shen Yu nodded. Shen Yu. I understand what you mean. You want me to remove the restriction spell in your body and let you go home. Yu Qianqiu said firmly, I can remove the restriction spell in your body, but only if you bring us in. What? Before Shen Yu could answer, Sungin Xian exclaimed, Yu Qianqiu. You must be tired of living. If it's really the mausoleum of the god of sin, how can we barge in with our cultivation? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and said, you don't have to go in and wait for me here. But since I'm here and there's a great opportunity in front of me, how can I not go in and broaden my horizons? Crazy. You're completely crazy. You're a lunatic. Sungin Xian's expression twitched. Yu Qianqiu had his own purpose and didn't bother to argue with him. He continued to ask Shen Yu. What do you think? This. Shen Yu was quite hesitant. He didn't know if he should bring an outsider in. Was it up to him? After some consideration, he gritted his teeth and said, fine. As long as you remove the restriction spell in my body, I'll bring you in. Then it's settled. However, you can't let your guard down. I can't remove the seal in your body right now. You'll have to wait until I'm safely inside, Yu Qianqiu said bluntly. Sungin Xian gritted his teeth once more and said, Yu Qianqiu, don't blame me for not reminding you. You and I don't know anything about the situation inside, so you have to consider clearly whether it's worth the risk. Yu Qianqiu frowned. Sungin Xian's words were not wrong. Although he was worried about Bai Changchun's life and death, it was not wise to blindly take the risk. He paused and said, Shen Yu. Tell me honestly, is there any danger in the forbidden area? If you dare to lie to me, you'll have to bear the consequences. I'm not a soft-hearted person. Think carefully before you speak. Shen Yu sighed slightly and said, it's impossible to say that there's no danger at all. Most of the gods who died had loyal subordinates when they were alive, and most of them would have someone guarding their mausoleum after they died. They guarded the mausoleum of the gods they were loyal to and generally did not care about others. As long as we know our place and do not trespass into the area they were guarding, nothing will happen. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and looked around before asking, you said that Jintai and Bai Chi did not dare to trespass this isolation zone with their cultivation, but you, a mere underworld supremacy, can come and go as you please. Is there a secret passage here? There's no secret passage. Jiu Yu pondered and shook his head. Actually, I don't know the reason either. Others would be crushed to pieces by that mysterious power here, but when I encounter that mysterious power, it always turns from majestic to gentle, like a gentle breeze brushing past me. I still can't figure out why. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that I was born inside and the people inside. There was such a strange thing. The two people beside him looked at each other and looked at Xinyu suspiciously, as if they wanted to see something different about him. However, they were not that observant. After a moment of silence, Yu Qianqiu waved at Xinyu and said, "Bring me in." "Wait." Sangyun Xian shouted and stared at Yu Qianqiu. He snorted and said, "Once you remove the restriction on him inside, you will no longer be able to restrain him. Even if there's no danger inside, have you thought about how you're going to pass through this isolation zone when you come back? I'm afraid you'll never be able to come back." He had no choice but to be careful. Now that Yu Qianqiu's life was related to his life, the immortal palace might even find an excuse to attack the passionless palace. Even if he could hide in the netherworld and not go back, ignoring the existence of the heartless palace, if the heartless palace was really destroyed, he, Grey Cloud Xian, would lose his backing to deter others. It would be very difficult for him to survive in the netherworld alone. At the same time, the immortal palace would not allow him to hide in the netherworld and live comfortably. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not think about this at all because it was not a problem for him at all. He could leave whenever he wanted to. Xinyu smiled bitterly and said, "Then what does Mr. Tsang want? Send us out safely and then let him remove the restriction on you." Sangyun Xian narrowed his eyes. "Us?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned again. "Didn't you say you wouldn't go in?" Sangyun Xian looked around, then glanced at him and said, "Since there is no danger inside and it's a rare opportunity to see the mausoleum of the god of sin, why not go in and have a look?" He said this against his will. In fact, he did not want to go in at all, but he did not have the courage to stay in this damn place alone. Who knew if he would run into that mysterious power? Moreover, he did not know when Yu Qianqiu would come back. It should be known that the longer he stayed, the more likely it was that he would run into it. If he did not wait for Yu Qianqiu to come out, he did not dare to go back alone. He did not dare to believe that the three of them could make it all the way here. At least, he was not confident that he could return the way he came from. All along the way, Yu Qianqiu had repeatedly turned danger into safety, causing him to feel that it was safer to be by Yu Qianqiu's side. In short, in the end, it was a fact that he wasn't willing to admit. He was afraid. What if after I send you out, you don't help me remove the restriction in my body? Jiu Yu said with a bitter face. He could not help but worry. What if these two fellows saw that he could enter and exit the forbidden area at will and wanted to take him as their exclusive property? That was a very likely possibility. Sangyun Xian immediately sneered and said, "You have no choice. You have to agree whether you want to or not. Otherwise, I will make it so that you will never be able to go back." Yu Qianqiu looked at him in pain. This was clearly a threat. If he did not agree, he would kill him. Jiu Yu looked helpless. He really had no choice but to resign himself to fate. He said sadly, "I agree." His goal was achieved. Sangyun Xian snorted and did not speak. Yu Qianqiu patted Jiu Yu's shoulder and comforted him, "Don't worry. I, Yu Qianqiu, am a man of my word. Before I leave this place, I will remove the restriction in your body and let you go back safely. What do we do now?" In fact, this place was more difficult than ascending to heaven for others, but it was not a problem for Jiu Yu. He asked Yu Qianqiu to put away the flying shuttle and revealed his true form again. He opened his clamshell and wrapped the two of them inside. Then, he dove into the river Styx below and continued to move quickly along the river Styx. In less than half an hour, Jiu Yu, who was moving quickly in the water, constantly felt the mysterious and terrifying power crushing and tearing at him. From time to time, his huge clamshell would shine with a gorgeous light. Whenever the mysterious and terrifying power encountered the light, it would slip past his body. The further they went, the more frequent the mysterious power appeared. As they encountered it more frequently, the faint light on Jiao Yu's body flickered non-stop. In the end, the light on his body was like a lamp that would never be extinguished. It was obvious that the mysterious power had completely filled this space. It was impossible to sneak past it. 3 days. With Tsangyan Xian's cultivation, driving the flying shuttle would not take more than a day. However, Jiao Yu took a full 3 days. In front of them, a 1,000-meter-tall mountain appeared. The entire mountain extended endlessly to the left and right like a tall great wall. The mountain faced the river Styx, and there was a huge waterfall that looked like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. From the top of the mountain, one could hear the loud sound of water falling. The water of the river Styx came from it. Jiao Yu, who was rapidly approaching, shot out of the huge pool that the waterfall created at the foot of the mountain. He went against the flow of the waterfall and soon reached the top of the waterfall. From below, it looked like a mountain, but when he reached the top, he saw a plain with a river flowing on it. "We're here. You can come out now." Jiao Yu's voice was very excited. He slowly floated out of the water and opened his huge clamshell. After 2 figures flashed to the shore, he also turned into his human form and went to the shore. The sound of flowing water came from beside the 3 of them. The waterfall was not far from their feet. Jiao Yu knelt on the ground and covered his face with his hands as he sobbed. "I'm really back." Yu Qianqiu and Tsangyan Xian, on the other hand, looked at their surroundings, dumbfounded. The direction in which the waterfall flowed was like a black curtain falling from the sky. They could vaguely see the mountains and rivers below. It was the netherworld that they had come from. On the mountain, behind them, upstream of the river, with the edge of the mountain as the boundary, there was a strange scene that was clearly separated from the foot of the mountain. Although the mountain and the foot of the mountain both looked like it was night, it was like 2 different worlds. The night at the foot of the mountain was forever immersed in endless darkness, but the night at the top of the mountain was filled with twinkling stars. There was also a bright moon hanging in the night sky. The white moonlight shone on the ground like mercury, allowing everything to be seen clearly. Yu Qianqiu and Tsangyan Xian's mouths were wide open as they looked up at the bright moon in the sky. This moon was not like the moon they had seen in the mortal world or the immortal world. It was dozens or even hundreds of times bigger than the moon they had seen before. The huge moon hanging in the sky was terrifying. Chapter 1058. If one looked closely, they would find that the deep ravines on the moon seemed to be faintly visible. Such a huge moon hanging in the sky gave people the feeling that it would fall at any time. The sound of the waterfall mixed with Ji Yu's joyful cries after his return. Coupled with the sky full of stars and the huge and scary moon, it gave the 2 an inexplicable strange feeling. After a while, Ji recovered from his excitement and slowly stood up, wiping the tears on his face. Yu Qianqiu coughed and pointed at the big moon in the sky. "Ji Yu. Is that really the moon in the sky?" "Of course it's the moon." Ji Yu looked up at the moon and sighed. 150,000 years ago, after I left the mountain, I couldn't get used to not seeing the moon in the sky. So when I first met the water tribe of the river Styx, I asked them where the moon was. They thought I was playing with them, so they chased me and tried to kill me. Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked at him as if he was looking at an idiot. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but roll his eyes. There are no sun, moon, and stars in the netherworld, let alone such a big moon. You asked them where the moon was in the sky. It would be strange if they didn't think you were playing with them. You deserve to be killed. That's right. Ji Yu sighed. But I've never left this place before, so how would I know there's no moon in the netherworld? Now that I think about it, maybe I ended up like this because I asked about the moon. Otherwise, I would have come back long ago. The corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He seemed to vaguely remember a saying in his previous life, "It's all the moon's fault." It couldn't be more suitable to be used on this unlucky guy. He patted his shoulder and comforted him. You can't blame yourself for this. It's all the moon's fault. Let bygones be bygones. Now that you're finally back, just treat it as going out to see the world. If you hadn't wandered outside for 150,000 years, how would you know there's no moon in the netherworld? Pfft. Zhu Qianzhou couldn't help but scoff. He had never seen anyone comforting someone like this. It was no different from provoking someone. Sure enough, Shen Yu's expression twitched as he said, if it takes 150,000 years just to find out if the netherworld has a moon, then I'd rather not know if the netherworld has a moon. If I could cultivate here peacefully for 150,000 years, I might have broken through to the underworld emperor period. Damn it. Then you can slowly regret it. What does it have to do with me? Yu Qianzhou had a feeling that his good intentions had been treated as malicious intent. He pointed to the depths of the plain and asked in annoyance, where should we go next? Zhou Yu looked at the flowing river and murmured, I naturally want to go to where I came from, which is the source of this river. Yu Qianzhou looked at the waterfall under his feet. His eyes lit up as he said, in other words, you lived at the source of the river Styx. Grey Cloud Xian looked at Shen Yu curiously. You can say that. Zhou Yu looked at the two and asked, are you going to my place? It's my honor to have the opportunity to see the source of the river Styx that nurtured the entire river Styx water tribe. How long will it take to get to your place? Yu Qianzhou asked. I came down along this river in less than a month. Zhou Yu looked at Grey Cloud Xian and said, with sinecure Tsang speed, it shouldn't take more than 10 days. 10 days? Yu Qianzhou thought for a while and shook his head. That's too long. I came here to look for someone. If I can't find him, I have to hurry back to the celestial world to attend the celestial emperor's wedding. Look for someone? Grey Cloud Xian and Shen Yu were speechless. Grey Cloud Xian sneered and said, Yu Qianzhou. Are you kidding me? You came here to look for someone? Don't tell me you have an acquaintance here. Yu Qianzhou said after some thought, I heard that there was an expert who fought a great battle with the underworld emperor. In the end, the expert fled here while being hunted by the underworld emperor. I am here to find him. He didn't want to tell them about this because he didn't think he could really break into the forbidden area of the underworld. However, he needed Shen Yu's help to find Bai Changchun. After all, he was unfamiliar with this place, so he had to tell Shen Yu who he was looking for. He couldn't let Zhou Yu search aimlessly. Him? The expert in the human world, Bai Changchun, who challenged the emperor of the netherworld. Zhou Yu was shocked. Grey Cloud Xian was also suspicious and said, why are you looking for him? There is naturally a reason why I am looking for him. As for why I am looking for him, once we find him, you will naturally know. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand. It was certainly not convenient to tell these two the truth. Grey Cloud Xian sneered. I've long suspected that there's something wrong with your collection. You really have other intentions. I've accompanied you all the way here in vain. Old song. It's not nice of you to say that. If you hadn't followed me all the way here, would you have had the chance to come to the forbidden area of the underworld? Many people want to come here but don't have the luck. Yu Qianzhou pointed to the big moon in the sky and said, if you hadn't followed me all the way here, would you have had the chance to come to the forbidden area of the underworld to see such a big moon? Even immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Netherworld Bai Qi have not seen something like this. How many people can you find in the 3 realms? I'm afraid there isn't anyone except the 3 of us here. So you should thank me for bringing you here to feast your eyes. Nonsense. Grey Cloud Xian flicked his sleeve and turned his head away. He sneered. Zhou Yu is unlucky because he didn't see the big moon when he left here. I hope you and I won't be unlucky because we came here and saw the big moon. Don't worry. Long live I won't be unlucky. The one who will be unlucky is you. Yu Qianzhou retorted. Grey Cloud Xian snorted and didn't say anything. After spending so much time together, he knew that this guy had a sharp tongue. He would be in the wrong if they continued arguing, so he didn't say anything. Seeing that the two of them had stopped arguing, Shen Yu scratched his head and said, that Bai Changchun's cultivation level is not bad, but it is still far from Bai Qi and Jin Tai's cultivation level. If even the two of them can't come in, then that Bai Changchun can't come in either. Moreover, I heard that he was severely injured by the Emperor of the Netherworld. If I'm not wrong, that Bai Changchun should have died in the quarantine zone, so there is no need to find him. Bullsh *T. Yu Qianzhou shouted angrily. He pointed at Shen Yu and said, "You better pray that he is alive. Otherwise, you won't be able to live either." Shen Yu was startled. He exchanged a look with Grey Cloud Xian. He didn't know why this guy suddenly turned on him. Grey Cloud Xian snorted coldly and said, "Don't bother with him. This guy is a complete lunatic. Don't talk nonsense in front of me." Yu Qianzhou pointed at his head and said with a ferocious expression, "Zhou Yu is dead. You won't be able to leave this place alive. Just stay here and guard the mausoleum for those dead gods. You must have taken the wrong medicine." Grey Cloud Xian's expression turned cold. He said indifferently, "You won't be able to get out even if Zhou Yu is dead. I'm warning you, before we leave this place, you better not touch him. Otherwise, I will cut off my way out. Since I can't get out, I will kill you first to avenge my grandson." "You can try," Yu Qianzhou said sternly. Grey Cloud Xian immediately retorted, "Then you can try. Let's see if I dare to kill you or not." The two of them were at each other's throats again. Zhou Yu stood there with a bitter expression. In short, he was the unluckiest one. Even if Grey Cloud Xian killed Yu Qianzhou, he would also be unlucky. He sighed and said, "Then try your best to find him. If you really can't find him, there's nothing I can do." This finally made Yu Qianzhou feel better. He snorted coldly and said, "This is such a big place. Where do we start? How are we going to find him? I don't know which direction Bai Changchun came from. Anyway, he has to jump over this cliff. Let's search along this cliff and ask someone along the way." Zhou Yu said helplessly. Yu Qianzhou looked around and asked suspiciously, "Who should we ask? The dead in the mausoleum definitely can't speak. Of course, we'll look for the living guarding the mausoleum." Shen Yu looked ahead and said, "I remember there are 2 adjacent mausoleums less than half a day from here. I know the people guarding the mausoleum, but I don't know if Grandma Yen is still there. After all, 150,000 years have passed." "All right." Yu Qianzhou casually took out his flying artifact, and the three of them flashed on it. Then, Yu Qianzhou coughed and said, "Old song. Your cultivation is higher, so you should control it. That way, we can save some time." He had just fallen out with the other party, and now he immediately asked for help. He really had to put down his pride. People with thin skin would not be able to do that. Fortunately, Grey Cloud Xian did not want to waste time when the situation was unclear. He snorted coldly and looked at Yu Qianzhou with disdain. In the end, he still took over. Following the direction that Shen Yu pointed, the flying shuttle flew quickly. It took less than half a day for Shen Yu, and even less time for Grey Cloud Xian. In less than 4 hours, a mountain range began to appear under the silver moonlight. Under Shen Yu's guidance, Grey Cloud Xian slowed down and slowly flew toward a mountain that looked like the head of a monster. When they got closer, they could see that what looked like the eyes of 2 monsters were actually 2 bulging tombs. The 2 tombs were made of unknown dark red crystals, and they did not reflect light at all under the moonlight. Each of them was about 100 square meters, and they were less than 10 meters tall. And at the head of the monster mountain, there was a small single-family manor built with local materials and stones. Yu Qianzhou and Grey Cloud Xian looked at each other anxiously. After putting away the flying shuttle, Shen Yu flew to the front and said loudly, "Is Grandma Yen here?" "Xiaosu is here to see you." In the silence, there was suddenly an "oh" in the silent stone manor. I was wondering who it was. "It's Xiaosu. You haven't been here for many years. I thought you had forgotten about me." Chapter 1059. It was an old woman's voice, calm and indifferent. Soon after, a gray-clothed old woman slowly walked out of the house. Her snow-white hair was tied up behind her head, and her face was covered in wrinkles. However, she was very spirited. She walked into the small courtyard with her back straight. She curiously looked at Yu Qianqiu and Sangyin Exayan, who were in the air. This old woman's cultivation is very high. I can't see through her cultivation. Sangyin Exayan secretly transmitted his voice to Yu Qianqiu. He could tell that she was nervous. Nonsense. She came down from the divine world to guard the tomb. It would be strange if her cultivation was low. Yu Qianqiu replied secretly. Both of them could tell that this woman was not a meditation cultivator. Under Shen Yu's guidance, the three of them landed outside the courtyard. They didn't land directly inside as a sign of respect. Once the three of them walked into the courtyard, Shen Yu quickly stepped forward and bowed. Xiao Su greets Granny Yen. Yu Qianqiu followed suit and bowed. Yu Qianqiu greets Granny Yen. He was a polite person. He secretly looked at the environment of the courtyard and realized that it was too simple. He guessed that a person with such a state of mind wouldn't be a bad person, so he relaxed a lot. Sangyin Exayan's mouth twitched. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu. It didn't seem right for him to stand there alone. Hence, he followed suit and bowed. Sangyin Exayan greets Granny Yen. Granny Yen glanced at the two of them and didn't pay much attention to them. She looked at Shen Yu and sighed. Time flies. I don't know how long it has been since I lived here alone. Xiao Su, we haven't seen each other for at least 100,000 years, right? Why did you bring two strangers with you today? Why are you looking for me? Let me make this clear. Even if we are old acquaintances, I won't go out to do anything for you. You should know this. Shen Yu smiled bitterly. I remember Granny's words. You once said that the other tomb guard who lived with you in the past had divined for you. He told you not to go out and get involved with any karma. Otherwise, the tomb will be destroyed and you will die. As long as you remember. At this moment, a smile appeared on Granny Yan's face. She looked at Shen Yu again and said with a smile, you haven't made any progress in your cultivation after so many years. Looks like you've been slacking off. But it's good too. You'll be more at ease with a lower cultivation, and you won't cause any trouble for yourself. The person lying here in eternal sleep is a good example. Shen Yu did not know whether to laugh or cry. It's not that I'm slacking off, it's just that I haven't had the chance to cultivate all these years. I've been running for my life, so my cultivation hasn't improved much. Yu Qianqiu and Sangyin Exayan stood behind him without saying a word. In fact, there was no room for them to interrupt. Escape? Grandma Yen was slightly taken aback and asked in astonishment, what did you do? Most of the people who are willing to guard the tomb here are people who have gotten rid of all distracting thoughts. Very few people would have the thought of fighting and killing again. Could it be that you have committed a great taboo and touched someone's tomb? Xiao Yu doesn't even know about this taboo. It's really a long story. Shen Yu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, I couldn't help but run out along that river because of a moment of impulse. As a result, I've caused many disasters and haven't found a chance to return. In fact, I've just returned from outside. You can actually pass through the heavenly barrier? How is that possible? Granny Yen let out a breath of cold air. Then, as if it had nothing to do with her, she regained her calmness. However, she seemed to have thought of something and tried to ask, Xiaosu, since you've been outside, have you heard of a girl called Taishu Xian? A girl called Taishu Xian? Shen Yu was stunned. After thinking for a while, he shook his head and said, I've never heard of her. Who is she? Yu Qianqiu, who was at the side, also thought about it. He had heard of the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Zheng, but he was a man. As for Taishu Xian's woman, he had never heard of it. As he thought about it, he tilted his head to look at Sangyin Exayan. Coincidentally, Sangyin Exayan also looked at him with a questioning look. Both of them immediately understood that no one had heard of her. She's the girl who lived with me and guarded the tomb together. Forget it. Since you don't know, forget it. Grandma Yen waved her hand and glanced at the other two. Xiao Yu, why did you bring two strangers to me? Shen Yu was afraid of causing a misunderstanding, so he immediately cupped his hands and said, they are my friends. We're looking for someone, and we're here to ask Grandma about this person. Then you found the wrong person. Grandma Yen shook her head and said, I rarely leave this mountain and almost never go out. I've cut off any contact with the outside world. How would I know the person you're looking for? As soon as she said that, Yu Qianzhou's face darkened slightly. Shen Yu glanced at him and asked with a last glimmer of hope, the person we're looking for also broke in from the outside. It shouldn't have been too long since he broke in. With Grandma's cultivation, you should be able to sense if someone passed by here. Could it be? I'll naturally tell you if I know. Grandma Yen raised her hand and interrupted him. I haven't spoken so much for a long time. I'm not used to it. She suddenly paused and frowned. The person who broke in from the outside not long ago? She seemed to have thought of something. Yu Qianzhou immediately became excited, but Grey Cloud Xian secretly transmitted a voice message to stop him. Yu Qianzhou. Don't interrupt. Grandma Yan's cultivation is unfathomable, and she doesn't seem to be interested in us. Don't annoy her. Let Shen Yu take his time. There's no hurry. Yu Qianzhou thought about it and held back. That's right. Shen Yu said excitedly, Grandma, do you remember? It's been a long time since I've thought about things. My brain isn't working well. However, Xiao Yu reminded me of something. Grandma Yen pondered and said slowly, not long ago, Old Man Meng, who was guarding the tomb in the south, suddenly came to me angrily and asked me if I had seen an old man in a green robe. I asked him what was going on, and he said that he met an old man in a green robe not long ago. The old man passed by and asked him where this place was. After he told the old man the truth, who knew that the old man would bite the hand that fed him and set his eyes on his master's tomb. He said that he wanted to see how the god buried in the tomb was different from ordinary people. As a result, he angered Old Man Meng, and the two of them fought. The old man was only at the intermediate immortal emperor stage, while Old Man Meng was at the early minor god stage. Of course, the old man was no match for Old Man Meng, but he was quite good at escaping. Under Old Man Meng's pursuit, the old man managed to escape into the barrier of heavens. Yu Qianzhou's heart was pounding when he heard this. He thought that it must be that old man. Other than Old Man Bai, who else would dare to dig up the god's tomb to see what the dead god looked like? In addition to the green robe and the ability to escape, it must be Old Man Bai. He's still alive. I told you that he wouldn't die so easily. Yu Qianzhou was excited. Zhang Yunxin had also heard of the appearance of the person who challenged the emperor of the underworld. It was an old man in a green robe. Now that he heard Granny Yan's words, he could roughly guess that it was the Bai Changchun that Yu Qianzhou was looking for. He didn't expect that the guy who had been seriously injured by the emperor of the underworld was still alive, and he was as arrogant as ever. He even wanted to dig up the tomb of the god of sin in front of the tomb keeper whose cultivation was obviously higher than his, knowing that it was the tomb of the god of sin. Wasn't he looking for a fight? Madman. That guy was definitely a complete madman. Of course, Shen Yu had also heard of the Bai Changchun who caused a stir in the netherworld. He knew that he was the person he was looking for. When he heard that Bai Changchun was still alive, he immediately asked, Granny. You mean that the person entered the all-heavens boundary and returned to the outside world? Granny Yen shook her head slightly and said, Old Meng also thought that the guy knew that he was no match for him and escaped. Who knew that when Old Meng came back from a trip, he suddenly found that the man in the green robe came back again. Moreover, looking at the situation of the man standing by the tomb, it seemed that he was going to dig up the tomb. Old Meng was almost angered to death, so he rushed up and fought with the man in the green robe again. In the end, he still couldn't control the man in the green robe and let him escape into the all-heavens boundary. Old Meng, who had always been gentle, was so angry that he stood in front of the all-heavens boundary and cursed. The man in the green robe seemed to have made up his mind to dig up the tomb to see what the god inside looked like. When the first time didn't work, he came a second time and a third time. Even old Meng himself couldn't remember how many times they fought. In the end, old Meng suddenly realized that the man in the green robe seemed to be addicted to fighting with him. It seemed that he was using him to train himself. Later, old Meng figured out the pattern of the man's every time he came, so he ambushed the man in the green robe and didn't give him a chance to escape back into the all heavens boundary. But in the end, he still lost the man in the pursuit. It was not easy for old Meng to force the man to not have a chance to escape back into the all heavens boundary. Naturally, he wouldn't give up easily. Otherwise, he would be annoyed to death in the future. So he chased in the direction that the man might have escaped to. When he met me here, he estimated that there was no hope of catching up with him, so he went back. Speaking of which, although the man is hateful, he does have some ability to enter and exit the all heavens boundary at will. Is he the person you are looking for? The three of them looked at each other speechlessly. Bai Changchun broke into the underworld royal palace alone to challenge the emperor of the underworld. No matter what, he should be a famous figure in the three realms. But they didn't expect him to be so bored. Why did he keep thinking about digging other people's tombs? Could it be that there was some treasure in the tomb? The one who was the most speechless was Yu Qianqiu. He was a little embarrassed to admit that this was the master he was so proud of. Granny Yen looked at the expressions of the three of them and said indifferently, "It seems that it is. That person should be the person you are looking for. I don't care why you are looking for him. If you really want to find him, you can try your luck with old Meng. I guess the person you are looking for won't give up on old Meng so easily. All right. I've told you what I know. I haven't talked so much for a long time. I'm not used to it. Xiaofu, I won't keep you. Don't bring irrelevant people here in the future." She was asking them to leave. It seemed that she really didn't like these two strangers. Chapter 1060. Since he had spoken so straightforwardly, the three of them naturally didn't want to stay and ask any more questions. With Jiu as the leader, they left one after another. The three of them walked out of the small courtyard obediently. Yu Qianqiu took out his flying instrument again. After the three of them boarded it, it was still Tsung Xian who drove it. Before leaving, the three of them once again bowed to Grandma Yen, who was standing in the courtyard. Just as the flying shuttle slowly flew away, Yu Qianqiu looked back again. His gaze inadvertently swept across the grave on the left side of the mountain, and he seemed to see a familiar name on the tombstone. That name flashed across his mind like a flash of lightning, but it was quickly captured by him. Immediately, he cried out in alarm, "Wait a minute. Old Sung, stop." The flying shuttle that was about to accelerate suddenly stopped in the air. Tsung Xian looked back and said in a deep voice, "What do you want again? Don't be crazy again. Don't you know where you are?" Grandma Yen, who was about to turn back to her house in the courtyard, also turned around when she heard the voice. Her eyes flickered as she stared at the few people on the flying shuttle. Jiu Yu awkwardly bowed to Yu Qianqiu and apologized. Then, he gently pulled Yu Qianqiu and said in a low voice, "If you have anything to say, wait until we leave this place. Don't make too much noise here. If you disturb the resting dead, Grandma Yen will not be happy." Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and waved away his hand that was pulling him. His puzzled gaze kept sweeping back and forth between the two piles of graves that looked like the eyes of a monster. On the tombstone on the left was written, "Father, Taishu Zheng's tomb." Woman, Taishu Xian's tomb. On the right was written, "Husband, Moon God's tomb." Wife, Yan's tomb. Taishu Zheng. Taishu Xian. Aren't all the gods buried here? Why is Taishu Zheng's tomb here? Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed slightly, frowned and pondered for a while, shook his head and muttered to himself, "Maybe it's a coincidence that we have the same name." Then he came to his senses, waved his hand at Tsung Xian and said, "It's all right, I didn't leave, right?" Since the two of them were standing so close to each other, Tsung Xian naturally heard what he said. He looked at Taishu Zheng's tombstone with some doubt and was prepared to ask about it later. Just as he was about to drive the flying shuttle, he heard Grandma Yan's voice coming from below. Wait. The three of them were shocked, thinking that Yu Qianzhou's loud voice had angered her. Shen Yu immediately smiled bitterly and cupped his hands at her. Grandma Yan, please calm down. It's his first time here and he doesn't know the rules here. Granny Yan, please be magnanimous and let him off. There was no other way. If something were to happen to Yu Qianzhou, he would also be in trouble. Thus, he could only try his best to help. I'm not as heartless as you think. Grandma Yan's eyes became bright and lively. She raised her hand and pointed at Yu Qianzhou and said, you actually know about Taishu Zheng and Taishu Xian. This old lady is a little surprised. Why don't you come down and have a good chat with this old lady? I told you not to talk nonsense, but you didn't listen. Look at you now. Sangyun Xian secretly sent a voice transmission angrily. Yu Qianzhou looked at Shen Yu speechlessly, as if he was asking if it would be okay. While Shen Yu was also trying to figure out Grandma Yan's intention, Grandma Yan had already teleported to the tomb on the left. She waved at Yu Qianzhou, who was in the air, and said, don't worry. If I still have a fiery temper, I wouldn't be guarding the tomb here. Come down and have a chat with this old lady. I have something to ask you. Yu Qianzhou paused, then cupped his hands and said with a hearty smile, I'll do as you say. In a flash, he appeared in front of the tomb on the left. He looked abnormally short in front of the 7 to 8 meters tall tombstone. The dark red words on the tombstone were like a bloody mouth that wanted to devour him. It made him feel a little uncomfortable. I wonder what Grandma Yan wants to ask this junior? Yu Qianzhou asked respectfully. Grandma Yan walked to the tombstone and raised her hand to touch the 3 relatively small words, Taishu Xian. After a while, her palm landed on the word, Xian. She tilted her head and looked at Yu Qianzhou with a smile. If I remember correctly, you used to call yourself Yu Qianzhou, right? Grandma has a good memory. I just said my name casually once, and Grandma remembered it. Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands in amazement and said, that's right. I am indeed Yu Qianzhou. The 2 people on the flying shuttle showed a disgusted look at the same time. What a glib-tongued junior. I'm not so old that I can forget what I just heard. Grandma Yan retracted her hand from the tombstone. She looked at Yu Qianzhou carefully for a while and said, you're only at the early stage of minor immortal. I wonder how many years you've been cultivating for you to achieve what you have today. Yu Qianzhou was slightly shocked to see that the other party was able to see through his cultivation with a single glance. He replied honestly, time flies in the blink of an eye. Unknowingly, it has already been over 40 years since I stepped onto the path of cultivation. I've been mediocre for so many years. Initially, he wanted to lie for hundreds or even thousands of years, but he couldn't figure out how good the other party's eyesight was, so he could only answer honestly. You've reached the early stage of minor immortal in just 40 years? Grandma Yan looked at him again in surprise and said, how can you be so fast? I can see that your aptitude isn't top-notch. Could it be that you've taken some panacea? Shen Yu and Sangyun Xian were equally surprised. To be able to step into the minor immortal cultivation from a mortal in just a few decades was indeed incredible. Grandma, please understand. Yu Qianzhou quickly followed her words and said with a silly smile, I've relied on panacea to forcefully increase my cultivation. I've taken the Great Restriction Breaking Pill, the Marrow Cleansing Pill, and the Immortal Ascension Pill. That's why I've barely reached the early stage of minor immortal cultivation. Grandma Yan revealed a look of understanding. Then, she said with some regret, although it's fast to increase your cultivation this way, it's spoiling your body's foundation. Your future achievements will be limited. Unless you have the opportunity to go to the divine realm in the future to obtain some opportunities, otherwise, forget it. It's easier said than done to ascend from the immortal world to the divine realm. She straightened her expression and returned to the topic at hand. She frowned and said, you've only stepped into the path of cultivation for a few decades. How could you have heard of Taishu Zheng and Taishu Xian? As far as I know, although Taishu Zheng was famous in the past, after he died in the hands of the devil god, under the suppression of the diabolism, very few people in the lower three realms know about Tai Shu Zheng. Even if you've heard of Tai Shu Zheng from someone else, his daughter, Tai Shu Xian, was not born in the lower three realms. How could someone from the lower three realms know about Tai Shu Xian? Lower three realms? Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment. Then, he understood. The so-called three realms in the past referred to the devil realm, the immortal realm, and the netherworld. But after the devil realm was sealed, everyone used to call it the lower three realms. So, the human realm replaced the devil realm and became the so-called three realms. In short, whether it was the three realms in the past or the current three realms, in the eyes of the people from the divine realm, they were all called the lower three realms because their divine realm was superior. Tai Shu Xian? I've never heard of it. I just couldn't help but feel puzzled when I saw the name on the tombstone. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He pointed to the grave made of dark red crystals and said, "So, the person buried in this grave is really the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu Zheng, who was equally famous as the devil god?" The ancestor of all demons who was equally famous as the devil god. Sangyun Xian and Shen Yu looked at each other in shock. They had naturally heard of the peerless devil god who dominated the three realms in the past, but they had never heard of the ancestor of all demons who was equally famous as the devil god. To be able to be equally famous as the devil god, how powerful must that person be? But why had they never heard of it before? Thinking about what Granny Yen had said before, the two of them suddenly fell into deep thought. The ancestor of all demons died in the hands of the devil god. Maybe there was some secret between the two that the devil god didn't want outsiders to know. So, the diabolism suppressed it and made this past disappear from everyone's sight. However, the two of them felt strange. How did Yu Qianqiu know about the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu Zheng? Granny Yen nodded and said, "It seems that you really do know some things. You have some experience." That's right, the person resting in this grave is the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu Zheng, who was equally famous as the devil god. That's not right. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, "I heard that the ancestor of all demons didn't become a god when he died in the hands of the devil god. But why is his corpse buried here? Isn't this the place where gods are buried? This matter involves the realm of gods, and the process is extremely complicated. It's too far away for you to know, so there's no point in telling you." Granny Yen sighed slightly and said, "I wanted to ask you about little girl Xian. Since you don't know, then forget it. Go do what you should do." After saying that, she turned around and left. However, Yu Qianqiu couldn't stand it. Bai Suzhen was currently cultivating the Thousand Demons Heart Sutra left behind by Tai Shu Zheng. What if there were any hidden dangers in it? Since someone knew the ins and outs of this matter, he naturally had to ask about it. He immediately shouted anxiously, "Granny Yen, please wait." Seeing that he was making noise again, Shen Yu and Sangyun Xian were a little afraid. They were afraid that this guy would really anger Granny Yen. Sure enough, Granny Yen turned around and frowned. "I've already said that it's useless to tell you. Why do you have to force it? This isn't something that a little cultivator from the lower realm like you should know. Leave quickly, don't disturb the peace of the dead and anger me. Damn it. You want to ask me to stay, but I want to ask and disturb the peace of the dead. What kind of logic is this?" Yu Qianqiu felt sick in his heart, but on the surface, he sincerely cupped his hands and said, "Granny, did Tai Shu Xian pass through the barrier of heavens and go outside?" Granny Yen, who had already walked to the door of the small courtyard, immediately stopped and turned around. Her eyes were slightly cold as she said, "In that case, you have heard of little girl Xian, but you deliberately hid it from me just now?" Once he said those words and saw the anger that rose between his eyebrows, Shen Yu and Grey Cloud Xian immediately became on tenterhooks. Grey Cloud Xian even cursed Yu Qianqiu in his heart for having nothing better to do than to look for trouble. Chapter 1061. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, did not think this way. He was more confident in bargaining because he had guessed Tai Shu Xian's whereabouts correctly. He cupped his fists respectfully and said, Junior has always yearned for those legendary seniors. Therefore, every time I hear about their deeds, if I don't ask them about it, I will feel as if I'm sitting on pins and needles. Because of this, I heard some things about the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu Zheng, and was able to talk to Grandma face to face. If Granny is willing to tell me the details, I will immediately use all the forces in the 3 realms to track down the whereabouts of Tai Shu Xian. You are just a lowly pawn in the early stage of small immortal. How dare you ask me to use all the forces in the 3 realms to help me find that person? Humph. How many people can you use with your lowly cultivation? Granny Yen said as she approached him step by step. She said in a deep voice with a frosty face, How dare you play the game of bargaining in front of me? It seems that I have to teach you a lesson. Yu Qianqiu had always been one to achieve his goals. Every time something big happened, he would remain calm. He squinted his eyes and did not show any fear. Instead, he calmed down. Without moving, he cupped his hands and replied calmly, Granny, you are wrong. Although my cultivation is not high, I am afraid that few people in the lower realm can compare to me in terms of connections. Seeing that the other party was still approaching, he raised his bargaining chip again and said, Let's not talk about anything else. I have the decree of the immortal emperor in the immortal world, so I can travel freely in the immortal world. I also have the token of the emperor of the underworld given by the emperor of the underworld, so I can do whatever I want in the underworld. Except for the devil realm which is sealed and I can't enter, I think it is not difficult to find someone in the lower realm. As long as she is still in the lower realm, I have a way to find her. Then he pointed at Xin Yu and continued to raise his bargaining chip. He said confidently, in order to find the person who broke into this place, I can even find Xin Yu and enter the barrier of heavens to search. Do you still not believe in my ability to find someone even with these proofs? As a result, Granny Yen was still unmoved. It seemed that she did not believe his answer at all. In this critical situation, Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, Granny Yen. Even a person with a wide network like me has never heard of Tai Shu Xian in the lower realm. Aren't you worried that something has happened to her? Don't you want me to help you find out about her? Even if she is dead or alive. These words were like a spell that immediately froze Grandma Yen a few steps away from Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Sangyun Xian and Xin Yu, who were extremely nervous, slowly let out a sigh of relief. Although they were fine for the time being, the two of them were still very worried. Their eyes stared down without moving, although the cultivation of the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld are nothing in the god realm, they are still the overlords of a realm in the lower realm. How can they be friends with a minor immortal like you? Granny Yen looked at Xin Yu and said, Xiao Yu. Tell me honestly, is what he said true or false? Although the cultivation of the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld are nothing in the god realm, they are still the overlords of a realm in the lower realm. How can they be friends with a minor immortal like you? Granny Yen looked at Xin Yu and said, Xiao Yu. Tell me honestly, is what he said true or false? If you dare to help him deceive me, don't blame me for being rude. Even if he is deceiving you, my life is in his hands. Killing him is no different than killing me. I can't not help him. Xin Yu smiled bitterly in his heart and replied, Granny, you're worrying too much. In the outside world, his strength in the lower 3 realms is indeed extraordinary. Don't be fooled by his low cultivation level, he's the sect master of the World Chamber of Commerce in the immortal world. This time, the immortal emperor of the immortal realm even sent the chief consecrator of the number 1 sect, Heartless Palace, to protect him. Then, she pointed at Qingyun Xian and continued, just before we entered the barrier of heavens, I saw him talking to the emperor of the underworld in the endless horizon with my own eyes. What he said is true. Xin Yu could be said to have helped with all his might this time, but he had no other choice in order to save his life. Granny Yen slowly turned her head and looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, In that case, can you guarantee that you will help me find little girl Xian? This. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a while, then shook his head and said, I never boast shamelessly. If I can do it, I can do it. If I can't, I won't boast. If Granny says that she will. I can't guarantee that I will definitely help you find her. Since she has not been famous for so many years, I am worried that she might have met with an accident. But as long as she left some clues outside, I'll be able to find out about her. Chin Yun Xian, who was on the flying shuttle, really wanted to despise him. Wasn't he boasting shamelessly? The outside world was so big, and so many years had passed. Even if the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor joined forces, they might not be able to find out anything about Taishu Xian from some clues. You're amazing. You're more amazing than Jin Tai and Bai Qi combined. Although he thought about it, he naturally wouldn't expose it. After all, it also involved his fate. However, he still quite admired that guy. As long as he was determined, he dared to lie to anyone. He was really audacious. Jiu Yu, who was helping the villain, looked at Yu Qianqiu speechlessly. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu didn't promise to do everything. Instead, it made Granny Yen believe in his ability. This was Yu Qianqiu's method of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. In short, regardless of whether Granny Yen really believed him or not, the expression on her face finally eased. She asked lightly, "How are you going to help me find information about Xianyu?" Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. He cupped his hands and said, "Of course I have to ask Senior to tell me about her appearance and characteristics. Otherwise, I don't even know what she looks like. How can I send people to find her? And the approximate time she left here. Of course, the more detailed, the better." Granny Yen thought about it seriously. After a while, she slowly said, "I really don't remember the specific time since I passed my days here. It should be about 200,000 years. She is very beautiful. If someone saw her at that time, they would definitely remember her, so it shouldn't be difficult to find out. But I'm really afraid that her appearance will bring trouble to herself. Although she was born in the God realm, due to a strange fate, she was born with the underworld body. In other words, she is a meditation cultivator. Apart from these 2 points, she also has a rare ability in the world. She was born with the art of divination. These are the characteristics." After Granny Yen finished speaking, she suddenly realized that Yu Qianqiu was stunned and seemed to be distracted. She immediately snorted angrily and said, "Did you hear what I said? No, the art of divination." Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself blankly. He recalled the underworld saintess he met in the East Holy Land Palace. It seemed like she knew the art of divination. At that time, he felt that it was a little strange, so he had a deep impression of her. He shook his head slightly in disbelief and said, "Could it be her?" Chapter 1062. As soon as he said this, although his voice was soft, it immediately attracted the attention of the 3 people. They all looked at him in disbelief. Grey Cloud Xian stared blankly for a moment, then his lips curled into a disdainful smile. Based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu, he didn't think there was such a coincidence. Yu Qianqiu knew him as soon as he said he knew him. He guessed that Yu Qianqiu was trying to swindle him again. There was really nothing he didn't dare to do. Granny Yen regained her calmness after her surprise. She also didn't believe that there was such a coincidence. She dragged out a noncommittal "oh" and said, "It seems that there is no lack of coincidences in this world. Could it be that you've seen little Xian?" Yu Qianqiu thought about the scene when he bumped into the underworld saintess. He waved his hand and asked thoughtfully, "I'm not sure. Granny Yen, does the Taishu Xian you mentioned like to wear black clothes, have long hair that goes down her shoulders, and cover half of her face with a black veil?" Listening to him speak so clearly, Zhang Yunxin and Shen Yu looked at each other as if asking each other if they believed what he said. Granny Yan's eyes lit up and she said excitedly, "That's right. Little girl Xian had always had long hair that was unrestrained, and she liked to wear black clothes. As for the black veil that covers half of her face, it must be to hide her appearance. Does the person you mentioned know divination?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. "It's because you said Taishu Xian knows divination. When I first met that person, she used a pentagonal black sand table to perform divination for me." Black sand table. Granny Yen interrupted him in surprise. She took a step forward and grabbed Yu Qianzhou's wrist. She said excitedly, "That's right, it can't be wrong. Little Xian is used to using black sand to perform divination. You must have seen her. Tell me, what happened to her?" Zhang Yunxin and Shin Yu looked at each other again. Really? She can't be so accurate, right? Yu Qianzhou grimaced and waved his hand. With a twisted expression, he said, "Granny Yen. I know that you have a high cultivation level. Let's talk nicely. There's no need to get physical." Grandma Yen immediately reacted. She was too excited and used too much strength to pinch him. She let go of her hand in embarrassment and apologized, "I lost my composure. Sigh. I am greatly indebted to her mother. Before she passed away, she entrusted her to me to take care of her. For so many years, there has been no news of her. Now that I suddenly receive news of her, I can't help but lose control of my emotions. I hope that you can understand this old woman." "I'm sorry." "Understood. Understanding. If that's the case, then there's no mistake. We're talking about the same person." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand heartily and said with a hearty laugh, "I've never known her name, but it turns out that her name is Taishu Xian. Hee hee. It seems that some things are predestined by the heavens. She and I are good friends, and she has a close relationship with you, Granny. Now that I have met you, Granny, if this isn't fate, then what is it? You're good friends with her?" Grandma Yen looked at Yu Qianzhou with an infinitely gentle expression. She reached out to hold his hand and patted it gently, like a grandmother looking at her grandson. She nodded repeatedly and said, "That's right. It's indeed fate. Tell me quickly, how is she now?" Zhang Yunxin and Shin Yu were dumbfounded as they watched the two of them turn from a hostile couple into a close family. They didn't expect the world to be so unpredictable. It was really a coincidence that the Taishu Xian that Grandma Yen was looking for turned out to be a good friend of Yu Qianzhou. Even in their dreams, they didn't expect that Yu Qianzhou would pull their relationship all the way to the netherworld forbidden area. Yu Qianzhou didn't care so much. He was worried that the myriad demon heart sutra that Bai Suzhen was cultivating might have some hidden dangers. He wanted to deceive her and figure out the situation first. As for the future, he could think about it later. Anyway, he didn't do anything against reason, so there was no need for him to feel guilty. Thus, he patted Grandma Yan's hand intimately and said with a smile, "Granny, you can rest assured. Taishu Xian is living very well now. I'm afraid that no one in the netherworld or immortal world dares to touch her." "Oh. What do you mean?" Grandma Yen held his hand with both her hands, like a grandparent and grandchild who hadn't seen each other for a long time talking about their family. This happy scene was enviable to the onlookers. Yu Qianzhou looked back at the two people on the flying shuttle with a smile and said, "Actually, speaking of this Taishu Xian, although you haven't seen her before, the two of you must have heard of her great name. Her current status in the netherworld can be said to be second only to the Emperor. Can you guess who she is now?" Zhang Yunxin and Shin Yu were confused at first. Then, they looked at each other and cried out in unison, "Madame Heiqi?" Grandma Yen frowned and said, "Madame Heiqi? Could it be that little Xian has found a man she likes?" Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. He looked at the two disdainfully and said, "Is that all you know? Madame Heiqi is nothing. She is only the concubine of the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. Haven't you heard of the Underworld Saintess?" "Underworld Saintess?" Zhang Yunxin and Shin Yu cried out in surprise again. The two of them had naturally heard of the Underworld Saintess. However, this person was even more reclusive than the Emperor of the Underworld. She almost lived in seclusion in the Underworld Royal Palace. She was very mysterious. As time went by, unless someone mentioned her, very few people would remember her existence. Compared to Madame Heiqi, who had millions of soldiers and horses under her control, although the Underworld Saintess had a higher status in the Underworld Royal Palace, Madame Heiqi seemed to be second only to the Emperor of the Underworld. At this moment, Sungin Xian really wanted to ask Yu Qianqiu, are you kidding me? You are a close friend of the underworld saintess? However, revealing Madame He Chi's secret was no different from digging a hole for himself. When he thought of the conversation between the Emperor of the Underworld and Yu Qianqiu, who actually let everyone go, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. That's right. Yu Qianqiu turned around and looked at Grandma Yan with a smile. I am now sure that Taishu Xian is the underworld saintess conferred by the underworld emperor as the underworld saintess. She is very safe now. Grandma, you don't have to worry about her safety. That's good. Grandma Yan heaved a sigh of relief. Yu Qianqiu was a little puzzled and asked, since Taishu Xian can enter and exit the boundary of heavens, why didn't she come back to see you after more than 200,000 years? Could it be that Grandma had some conflict with her? You've got the wrong idea. I brought her up by myself. I treat her as my own granddaughter. The two of us are lonely and depend on each other. How could there be any conflict? Grandma Yan let out a long sigh and recalled with a confused look in her eyes, speaking of which, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have told her about her background. That year, she suddenly speculated that there would always be a loophole in the boundary of heavens, and the insurmountable boundary of heavens would open a path for a short period of time. The little girl was thinking about avenging her parents and decided to take advantage of this opportunity to escape from the boundary of heavens. She wanted to find a chance to avenge her parents outside. I couldn't persuade her, so I could only let her be. Avenge her parents? Yu Qianqiu looked at the towering tombstone beside him with a puzzled look and sighed. I didn't expect Taishu Zheng, the ancestor of all demons, to have a daughter. In that case, Taishu Xian wants to seek revenge on the demon god. Her ambition is commendable. I hope she can kill the demon god as soon as possible. Because of this, he thought of Yan Zhuixing. Although he had gone to the sealed demonic world, he couldn't let go of the fact that he had the background of the demon god. He was afraid that the bastard would make a comeback at any time. If the saintess of the underworld had a way to eliminate the demon god, the pressure on him would be greatly reduced. No matter how powerful Yan Zhuixing was, he had the courage to fight him. However, the demon god's reputation was too great. Although he had gone to the divine world long ago, his heart-palpitating legend still lingered in the three realms. His influence had lingered for a long time. It was very frightening. Seeking revenge on the demon god? It's easier said than done. Grandma Yan's pupils shrank. She seemed to have thought of something and her eyes were filled with horror. She shook her head with great difficulty and said, You haven't seen the power of the demon god. It's hard to imagine how terrifying he is. He's so powerful that it makes one's hair stand on end. It's not an exaggeration to say that he's a peerless genius. Perhaps, he's even called the peerless genius. The demon god is the #1 expert in the divine world. It's almost impossible for little Xian to avenge her parents. What? Yu Qianqiu turned pale with fright when he heard that. Mo Shen is the #1 expert of the deity world. Is he that powerful? He was cursing in his heart. Yan Zhuixing had actually found such a cunning backer. I don't want to admit how powerful the demon god is, but he's indeed so powerful. I'm someone who has personally experienced it. Grandma Yan raised her hand and pointed to another grave. She smiled bitterly and said, My man died in his hands, and I almost lost my life in his hands. Then, he waved his hand and pointed at the boundless land in the distance, sighing, There are close to 10 million experts from the divine world buried in this vast cemetery. In fact, the number of people who were qualified to rest here in the beginning was only a few hundred. However, ever since the demon god came to the divine world, there have been close to 10 million more dead people here. 10 million experts from the divine world died by his hands alone. No one could stop him in the divine world. So, tell me, is he not amazing? Killed more than 10 million experts in the divine world? Yu Qianqiu was shocked and his scalp tingled. He knew that the demon god was powerful, but he didn't expect him to be so arrogant in the divine world. There was actually such a fierce person in the world. But then he felt that something was wrong. He scratched his head with a trace of doubt and said, "Are there so many gods in the divine world? Just the number of people who died is almost 10 million. Then the gods in the divine world are too worthless. This is just a misunderstanding. The divine world has been multiplying for countless years and there are already trillions of living creatures. Because of the incomparable cultivation resources in the lower realm, there are also many experts of the divine level. But it's not so easy to obtain the position of God and be conferred as a real God. The cultivation in the divine world is divided into little god, great god and ancient god. If you want to be conferred as a god, your cultivation must at least reach the level of great god. And you have to go through fierce competition and get the recognition of several ancient gods before you can be conferred as a god. Chapter 1063. Speaking up to this point, Grandma Yen shook her head with a bitter expression and said, "However, it's precisely because the few ancient gods held the power to become gods that they provoked the demon god. He single-handedly turned the entire divine world into a bloodbath, and it almost fell apart and couldn't be resolved. Although they were shocked by the fierceness of the demon god, they couldn't help but admire him. He was indeed a peerless genius. He single-handedly turned the entire divine realm upside down. What kind of demeanor was that? The demon god made such a big movement in the divine realm. Could it be that he wanted to share the power to become gods with the few ancient gods? Yu Qianqiu wondered. After all, people rarely went on a killing spree if there was no conflict of interest. No. It's not because of this. Granny Yen let out a long sigh and said, "Deities are also made by humans. No matter how high the cultivation of a god is, he is still a human. Humans have selfish thoughts. The few ancient gods held the power to become gods. In addition, after so many years of reproduction, their respective races could be said to have many descendants. Since they had selfish thoughts, they would naturally fight for the interests of their own race. At least, they would be biased towards their own descendants. Therefore, for many years, whenever a new deity position was formed in the world, most of it would be divided by the few ancient gods. It was very difficult for others to gain anything." As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed to Tai Shu Zheng's tombstone and said, "Tai Shu Zheng, the demon god, and little Xian's mother." The tragedy between the three of them began. It was also because of this that the demon god trampled on all living beings in the divine realm. When these three people were placed together, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but exclaim. He thought of something and said, "Could it be that these three people are? I heard that there were three peerless geniuses in the lower realm in that era. They were the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu Zheng, the demon god Yi, and a woman called Ming. It seems that there is a story between the three of them. Since Tai Shu Zheng is Tai Shu Xian's father, could it be that the woman called Ming is Tai Shu Xian's mother?" As soon as he said this, Granny Yen immediately looked at him in surprise. She nodded and praised, "No wonder a minor immortal could have such a large network in the three realms. You even know such a secret. Not bad. Little Xian's mother was indeed Ming. But as far as I know, Ming rarely showed up in the lower realm and she was very low-key. She had never done anything that would make her famous. The number of people who knew of her existence could be counted with one's fingers. You actually know of her? This old woman has to look at you in a different light." Sangyun Xian and Shin Yu were also shocked. They did not expect Yu Qianqiu to know such a secret. Sangyun Xian looked at Yu Qianqiu with a bewildered gaze. "Granny is too kind. I just happened to hear someone talking about it." After some modesty, Yu Qianqiu humbly asked, "I heard that the three of them had a conflict because of fighting over the godhood. This matter has to start from the few ancient gods." Granny Yen recalled the past and said, "Originally, there were only two realms, the netherworld and the current human world. At that time, there were not as many living beings in the world as there are now. All kinds of living beings mixed together. Among them, there were 12 great gods with profound cultivation, who are now known as the ancient gods. Later, as all kinds of living beings multiplied, the human world could no longer accommodate them and became more and more crowded. Therefore, the 12 ancient gods opened up 71 human worlds for all living beings to multiply and live in. Thus, there were 72 worlds in the human world. Finally, it's not crowded anymore. Then, one of the 12 ancient gods suggested that each person rule 6 realms. This method of equal distribution was agreed upon by the majority. However, the war god of the 12 ancient gods felt that it was unreasonable to divide the realms equally. They should divide the realms according to their strength. Due to his unfathomable strength, most people dare not speak out even if they are angry. Moreover, the 2 experts among the 12 ancient gods who can suppress the war god are not here. The publicly acknowledged number 1 expert, Tao, is elusive, appearing and disappearing from time to time. No one has seen him face to face. Among the 12 ancient gods, the great coiling dragon god and the great phoenix god only follow Tao's orders. Before receiving Tao's decree, they will not express any opinion on this matter. The other indignant ancient gods could only find another great god who could suppress the war god, Yi, to uphold justice. However, Yi's whereabouts were also uncertain. He often traveled in the vast sea of stars in the universe. Just when the war god was about to make a mess, Yi suddenly returned from the vast universe. The other ancient gods were overjoyed and looked for him to uphold justice. Therefore, Yi found the war god and persuaded him to keep the peace. In the end, the war god refused to accept his mediation. As expected, the 2 of them fought. They fought several times. The war god was no match for Yi. In his anger, he ignited the 2 souls and 7 spirits of his 3 souls and 7 spirits, wanting to perish together with everyone. Yi had no choice but to draw the supreme god bow and attach his life spirit to it. The other 2 souls and 7 spirits attached to the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. He shot 9 arrows in a row and sealed the ignited 2 souls and 7 spirits of the war god in 9 different time and space. An unprecedented battle that shocked the ancient gods ended just like that. And the 2 ancient gods fell apart just like that. Yu Qianqiu and the others listened with rapt attention. In fact, they had more or less heard of this legendary battle. It was just that too much time had passed, and there were many different versions of it. This was the first time they had heard of such a detailed story, and they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. TSK. A godly bow and arrow that could even seal a war god, its power is truly extraordinary. I wonder where these godly weapons ended up in the end? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked. He was thinking that if he could gather the 10,000 swords of the demon monarch of swords into one, heaven and earth splitting arrow, and then find that a supreme god bow, he should be able to deal with the demon monarch. It would be even better if he could kill the demon monarch with 1 arrow. Divine weapons can only be obtained by those who are fated. Grandma Yen shook her head and said, "There's no need to even think about the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. Our time and space is the main battlefield of the battle back then. The 9 divine arrows have already traveled to 9 other time and space. Unless someone's cultivation has reached the realm of the great god Yi and can travel to different time and space, how can they be found?" Hearing this, Zhangyan Xian and Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but glance at each other. Their eyes were filled with suspicion because they both knew that the 10,000 flying swords in the hands of the demon monarch of swords were the legendary great god Yi's heaven and earth splitting arrow. Could it be that the legend was wrong? Or was it that the demon monarch of swords didn't have the heaven and earth splitting arrow at all? Otherwise, how could the divine arrow that had traveled to 9 other time and space return? Grandma Yen continued, "However, the supreme god Bao is still in our time and space. Moreover, it's very likely that it's lying dormant in one of the 72 worlds in the human world. It's just that even the ancient gods couldn't find it. We don't know where it has gone." "What happened after that?" Yu Qianqiu asked while the iron was hot. He still had to look for Bai Changchun and didn't have time to waste here. Naturally, it was better to get to the bottom of things as soon as possible. Grandma Yen didn't hide it from him. She tilted her head to look at the tomb of the moon god and sighed. After that war, the 72 worlds that were originally divided by 12 people became 10 people. Naturally, they couldn't even share it even if they wanted to. In the end, they had to go to war again. At this time, the great phoenix god brought the decree of Tao. He asked them to stop fighting and give up the 72 worlds in the human world to all living beings. He asked the gods to open up a new world to live in and restricted them to not easily step into the human world in the future. When Yu Qianzhou heard this, he couldn't help but ask, I heard that there's an illusory god in the god realm. The dragons and phoenixes are his messengers. Is it this Tao? You even know about the god realm. It seems that you're really knowledgeable. Grandma Yen nodded in appreciation and said, that's right. There's an illusory god in the god realm, which is the Tao that I mentioned just now. The dragons and phoenixes are willing to be his messengers. Will the gods really listen to him obediently and give up the 72 worlds that have already been opened up? Yu Qianzhou said in disbelief. Of course not. You should know that even if it's an ancient god, it's not easy to open up a world. The energy required is also abnormally huge. Grandma Yen suddenly sneered and said, at that time, there were people who refused to do so. In the end, the coiling dragon god brazenly made a move and fought with the ancient god. In the end, he killed the ancient god. Everyone immediately swallowed their complaints and listened to him obediently. You should know that apart from the coiling dragon god, there was also the great phoenix god who was eyeing them covetously. Moreover, the two of them even had the support of Tao. Who dared to say anything? Therefore, the gods were forced to open up a world together. This world was much bigger than the 72 worlds combined. It is now the celestial world in the lower realm. However, not long after, Tao forced everyone to open up the god realm again and allowed the gods to migrate to the god realm. He also established the rule that mortals could ascend to the celestial world if they succeeded in their cultivation, and immortals could ascend to the god realm if they succeeded in their cultivation. Tao also allowed the 6 ancient gods, apart from the coiling dragon god and the great phoenix god, to hold the power to confer and become gods. He himself remained illusory and did not participate in these matters. The 6 ancient gods who obtained such power had the opportunity to establish their own supreme status. Finally, they no longer had any complaints about Tao. Actually, everyone knows the original intention of Tao when he established this ascension system. It was nothing more than to separate mortals, immortals, and gods so that everyone could do their own thing. Otherwise, the mortals with the weakest strength would forever be deprived of all the rights to live by the strong. There would be no chance for them to make a comeback at all. However, people were greedy. Even if they had a high and mighty position, they still could not be satisfied. The 6 ancient gods used the power in their hands to constantly expand their strength. They all wanted to seize the supreme power of life and death that looked down on everything. Chapter 1064. A disdainful sneer appeared on Granny Yan's face as she said, every time a divine splendor descends from the conferred god mountain in the extreme region of heaven-bearing, it means that someone in the world has attained the qualifications to be conferred as a god. The 6 ancient gods should summon the corresponding person to the conferred god mountain and absorb the divine splendor that descends from the sky to rapidly increase their cultivation and consolidate their position as gods. However, the 6 ancient gods who control the conferred god mountain don't follow the arrangement of the Tao. Every time a powerful divine light descends, it means that the person who is conferred as a god will have extraordinary achievements in the future once he absorbs such a powerful divine light. Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes and said with slight surprise, could it be that the 6 ancient gods are worried that someone will surpass them and do something to the divine light? Tsungyin Xian and Ji Yu looked at each other in shock. They didn't expect to hear such a secret of the god realm. Just based on this secret, Tsungyin Xian felt that it was worth it to take the risk with Yu Qianzhou this time. Granny Yen snorted coldly, one of the important reasons is that they are worried about being surpassed by the younger generation. What's more despicable is that they actually take the divine light for themselves. Every time a powerful divine light descends, the 6 ancient gods won't summon the person who is supposed to be conferred as a god to absorb the divine light that belongs to him. Instead, they quietly arrange for their descendants to come to the conferred God mountain to absorb the divine light and create an expert that belongs to their own tribe. F***ck. They're really despicable. Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. His expression twitched as he clicked his tongue. It seems like there are bastards who abuse their power for personal gain everywhere. They take all the benefits that belong to others. What about others? Others? Whether others live or die is not something they consider at all. Granny Yen snorted and said with a sarcastic expression, the 6 of them have already agreed that if the divine light belongs to one of their 6 tribes, then the other 5 tribes have no right to share it. If it doesn't belong to any one of the 6 tribes, then the 6 tribes will each choose one person from their tribe to come to the conferred God mountain to share the divine light. Of course, if the divine light is pitifully small, it won't be able to forge a divine body if it is shared by 6 disciples of the 6 tribes. Under such circumstances, the 6 ancient gods will find the corresponding person from the lower realm to absorb it. Damn it. No matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. Are the 6 ancient gods really willing to give it up? Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but mock. Granny Yen shook her head and said, you just don't know. It's not that the 6 ancient gods want to give up, but if the divine essence is too little, it can only help one person forge a divine body. If the disciples of the 6 races share it, not only will they not be able to forge a divine body, but it will also harm them. This was because once you absorb the divine essence, no matter how much you absorbed, you wouldn't be able to absorb any more even if you were given another chance. Usually, the amount of divine essence you absorb represents the level of your future achievements. Anyway, it won't pose any threat to the people of the lower realm even if they absorb it. Hence, under the situation where none of the 6 ancient gods wanted to let the other party take advantage of them, they gave the cultivators of the lower realm a chance to become a god. The most important thing is that although Tao doesn't care about what they are doing, it doesn't mean that Tao doesn't know what they are doing. The 6 ancient gods can't be too greedy. If they don't give any chance to the people of the lower realm, Tao might bring along the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god to deal with them one day. That would be more than enough for them to see. Although the 6 ancient gods have the advantage in numbers, I'm afraid that no one has the confidence to deal with that mysterious Tao, let alone the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, it's a pity that Tao created the rule of ascension for mortals, immortals and gods. It was originally a good intention to let everyone go their own way, but unfortunately, it was destroyed by the greed of a few people. I can't figure it out. Tao created this system, but why didn't he participate in it? He also didn't let the Dragon Clan and the Phoenix Clan who are loyal to him participate in it. With the participation and supervision of these 2 clans, the 6 ancient gods wouldn't be so unscrupulous to this extent. Could it be that Tao has always been indifferent to it and didn't interfere in it? Granny Yen pondered slightly and said, I don't know why, and no one can figure out why. Yu Qianqiu suddenly thought of something and said strangely, according to this, it means that there should be some people in the lower realm who have reached the qualification to become a god but haven't ascended to the divine realm. But why have I never heard of these people? With their ability, they should not be unknown people. Could it be that they have been killed by someone? That's not true. Speaking of those who were deprived of the opportunity to become a god, Granny Yen couldn't help but sigh and said, I heard from Ming that someone accidentally found a cultivation space in the Netherworld River in the Netherworld that the great god Coiling Dragon had opened. Although it was a space that had been abandoned for a long time, it was said that the great god Coiling Dragon had cultivated in it. For those who had no way to ascend to the divine realm, it was tantamount to finding the way to the divine realm. They treated it as a treasure land and gathered in it to cultivate, almost reluctant to come out. A cultivation space opened by the great god Coiling Dragon in the Netherworld River? Yu Qianqiu was taken aback and said. Shen Yu, who was on the flying shuttle, also couldn't help but let out an ah. The 2 of them looked at each other and obviously guessed something. Grey Cloud Xian looked at the 2 of them in confusion. He didn't know why the 2 of them were so surprised. Granny Yen also glanced at the 2 of them and asked, what's wrong? Do the 2 of you know that place too? Yu Qianqiu looked at Shen Yu again and guessed that the other party had the same guess as him. He then replied, I heard that there is a mysterious place in the Netherworld River, and there are almost godlike experts in it. It is called the Netherworld Spirit Mansion. I wonder if it is the cultivation space abandoned by the great god Coiling Dragon that you mentioned, Granny? You really are a knowledgeable person. It seems that there is no secret in the lower realm that you don't know. I only knew about it from the Ming. Granny Yen nodded with admiration and said, That's right. The place that Ming mentioned was named the Netherworld Spirit Mansion by the people who gathered there. Grey Cloud Xian took a deep breath and his face was full of shock. He didn't expect that there were so many godlike experts in the Netherworld. He felt that it was really worth it to take the risk with Yu Qianqiu this time. He actually knew such a big secret. If he brought this news back to the Passionless Palace, it would definitely be a great contribution. Sure enough. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. After thinking for a while, he changed the topic and asked, So? Did the demon god massacre the god realm because the divine essence that belonged to him was divided by the tribes of the 6 ancient gods? But that's not right. If it was divided, how could he ascend to the god realm and become a demon god? That's because the demon god Yu was too powerful. Granny Yen shook her head and sighed. I only managed to figure out the whole story of that storm after I combined it with what little Xian's mother, Ming, had told me about the lower realm. It's a mistake to classify Ming as a peerless genius like Zheng and Yi. In fact, although Ming has the cultivation of an early-stage small god, he is still far from the level where he can be conferred as a god. In the lower realm, only Zheng and Yi can be called peerless geniuses. With their abilities, even in the god realm, they are absolute masters and have long reached the level of being conferred as a god. But it's a pity that the two of them stayed in the lower realm and didn't know anything about the god realm. As their divine essence was too powerful, the divine essence that belonged to them had naturally been divided by the tribes of the 6 ancient gods. Zheng and Yi were originally friends. Their cultivation was rare in the world. Although the latter was a little stronger than the former, the difference was not too big. It's funny that the two of them didn't know anything about the god realm. They still appreciated each other and became good friends, working together to pursue the path to become a god. Later on, the two of them met Ming. Ming was a rare beauty in the world and her cultivation was also extraordinary. It made the two of them fall in love with Ming at first sight. And Ming was also amazed by their high cultivation and was very happy to become friends with them. As the saying goes, time breeds love. Not only did the two men fall in love with Ming, even Ming also developed feelings for Zheng. Naturally, the two of them got together. However, the two of them had scruples about Ye's feelings and had been secretly working together. On the surface, they maintained their previous relationship and were ready to find the right opportunity to tell Yi. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, since the cultivation of Yi is higher than that of Zheng, why did Ming choose Zheng and not Yi? I also asked Ming this question, but Ming said that it's because Ye's character is too clear about love and hate. If he likes something, then he likes it. If he doesn't like it, then he doesn't like it. It can even be described as extreme. In fact, Yi originally had a wife and a child. But after meeting Ming, Yi brazenly killed his wife in front of Ming, to show his determination to Ming. Granny Yen smiled bitterly and said, Ming was frightened at that time. I didn't expect Yi to be so cruel. Think about it, how could Ming be with Yi? If Yi falls in love with another woman in the future, wouldn't she follow in the footsteps of Ye's ex-wife? Lunatic. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and muttered to himself. He couldn't help but think of Bai Changchun who abandoned his family and son. He wondered if all the real experts had similar tendencies. Granny Yen continued, Yi didn't know about the other couple. He felt that it wasn't a good idea for the three of them to continue like this. There was only one Ming, and in the end, she could only be with one man. So, he secretly looked for Zheng and proposed a solution. He asked for them to cultivate in seclusion together. Whoever obtained the qualification to ascend to godhood first would give up the competition for Ming. In the face of such a ridiculous method, Justice can completely reject it because Dark has already secretly cooperated with him. At the very least, Dark has the right to make her own choice. It's not up to the two men to gamble with her life. However, a person who could reach the level of Zheng was naturally a proud person. He didn't think that he was weaker than his opponent. In the end, he was provoked by Yi and agreed to the bet with Yi behind Ming. Don't you think such a man is a fool? Chapter 1065. At that time, the lower realm was actually very chaotic. In order to find a quiet place to cultivate, the two men joined hands and opened up a huge space with their powerful cultivation. It was a huge space that was not smaller than the immortal realm, which later became the demon realm. However, it was precisely because of the earth-shattering actions of the two bastards that the 6 ancient gods who looked down on the lower realm were alarmed and all their attention was focused on them. The 6 ancient gods didn't expect that there would be an expert who could open up a new world in the lower realm. They felt that if these two people were to be left alone, they would be a big trouble in the future. Hence, they decided to eradicate these two people. However, there was a bottom line set by Dao in the god realm that the 6 ancient gods didn't dare to trample on. Dao once said that if anyone from the god realm dared to go to the lower realm without permission, he would be destroyed and would never be able to reincarnate. Although no one from the god realm dared to go to the lower realm, it didn't mean that the 6 ancient gods didn't have any way to deal with it. Hence, they secretly contacted the rulers of the immortal realm and the underworld, as well as the god-level experts in the netherworld palace, who couldn't ascend to the god realm, and asked them to gather their forces to eradicate Zheng and Yi. Hence, a turmoil that affected the lower realm began. The devil path led by Yi and the demon path led by Zheng suddenly suffered a heavy blow from the immortal realm and the underworld. There were also the experts in the netherworld palace, who were eyeing them covetously. The two experts who led the monster path and demon path naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. They immediately launched a strong counterattack. Zheng handed over the command of the group of demons to Yi. Yi led the monster path and Zheng led the monster path and attacked the immortal realm and the underworld so hard that they couldn't fight back. Zheng and Ming guarded the exit of the netherworld palace. They beat the god-level experts inside so hard that they didn't dare to come out. This allowed Yi to quickly kill the immortal realm and the underworld without any worries. After dealing with the immortal realm and the netherworld, Night was preparing to completely eradicate the hidden danger in the netherworld palace, when the 6 great ancient gods of the god realm were furious. It was impossible for them to unify the lower realm and have a huge force that could fight against the god realm. Coincidentally, at this time, a divine light descended from the seal of God Mountain and 2 god positions appeared. The 6 great ancient gods immediately took this opportunity to send their god envoys to the lower realm, preparing to summon Yi and Zheng to the divine realm, and then slowly deal with them. Zheng and Yi didn't expect that they would suddenly have the opportunity to ascend to the god realm. Although they were happy, they were also worried about their gains and losses. There were only 2 places to ascend to the god realm, and Dark didn't have the chance. Neither of them could let go of Dark. After Ming found out about this, she didn't want the 2 of them to waste this rare opportunity because of her, so she persuaded the 2 of them to go to the divine world first and wait for her there. She said that she would definitely cultivate diligently and sooner or later, she would also ascend to the divine world. At that time, the 3 of them would meet again in the divine world. Who knew that at this time, the 2 men actually decided to give up the rare opportunity to ascend to the divine world and stayed to accompany Dark. At this time, Zheng naturally didn't want to delay Night anymore, so he told her about his relationship with Dark. He said that it was he who should stay to accompany Dark and asked Night to cherish this rare opportunity to go to the divine world. However, Night's character is very easy to go to extremes. After knowing the truth of the matter, he immediately flew into a rage. He thought that Zheng had secretly colluded with Dark to open up a new world with him and was playing with him. In his rage, Night brazenly attacked Zheng. Not to mention that Zheng was not a match for Dark at that time. Zheng also felt guilty and was not prepared for it. He was seriously injured on the spot. When the devil god is angry, no one can stop him. Then, Night brazenly killed Zheng, who was seriously injured, regardless of Dark's desperate attempts to stop him. Not only that, Night didn't let it go. He even stripped away Zheng's primordial spirit and annihilated it. He didn't even give Zheng a chance to be reincarnated. It can be seen how crazy Night's stubborn character is. He turned against a friend of many years just like that. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the pair of cold and ruthless eyes that appeared in the sky in Lingfang Valley. Sure enough, it was filled with the smell of killing. But thinking of this, he couldn't help but have a trace of doubt. Since the devil god already had the strength to open up a space, in addition to that pair of cold and ruthless divine eyes that could lock on what happened in the human world at any time, he couldn't help but say doubtfully, "I've heard that there are almighty people who can open up a passage from one world to another at any time. Could it be that the devil god who could open up a space at that time still couldn't open up a passage to the divine realm?" Granny Yen shook her head and said, "Not only does Night have the ability to open up a passage to the divine realm, even Zheng has the same ability. But it's not as easy as you think to open up a passage from one world to another. It's easy to open up a passage, but you don't know where the destination is. In other words, you don't even know where the divine realm is. So what's the use of opening up a passage at random? Can you step into the divine realm just by opening up a space passage? Who dares to rush in blindly without knowing where the end of the broken void is? If that's the case, you might sink into the endless void forever and be devoured by an inexplicable force. If you don't know the way, you won't be able to enter. No matter how much effort you put in, it's all for naught. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding and asked again, "What happened after that?" Grey Cloud Xian and Shinyu stood on the flying shuttle and listened attentively. Being fortunate enough to hear these words, not only did it increase their knowledge, it was also greatly beneficial to their future cultivation. Granny Yen raised her hand and touched Taishu Zheng's tombstone with a sigh. After Zheng was killed, Ming collected his corpse and threatened to Night to take revenge on him. Night was still angry and immediately kidnapped her, wanting to bring Ming to the divine realm. He wanted the two of them to be together forever, saying that no one could take anything away from him. The messenger from the divine realm didn't expect such a thing to happen. He didn't expect that the two targets he wanted to eliminate would actually kill each other. One of them died so easily. After the shock, not only did he not get angry, but he happily took care of both of them and brought them to the divine realm. After arriving at the divine realm, Night found that the divine realm wasn't as beautiful as he imagined. The entire divine realm was obviously the exclusive land of the ancient gods. As an outsider, he didn't have much power and was even ostracized on the way to the god's sealing mountain. Especially when he heard the secret ridicule from the descendants of the 6 great clans. Only then did he understand that he and Zheng should have ascended to the god realm a long time ago, and the divine splendor that belonged to the two of them had long been divided by the others. Now, what was given to him was what was left of the others. Night and Ming were chased into the ancient and desolate forbidden land of gods. Looking at the two divine splendors that fell from the sky, although they were beautiful and dazzling, they were too thin rays. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and loosened the restriction on Ming. Two former friends, but now enemies, faced each other alone in the ancient and desolate forbidden land of gods. One of them cursed angrily, while the other shook his head and smiled bitterly. At that time, Ming had the idea of committing suicide, so she spoke incoherently. She actually said that she was pregnant with Zheng's flesh and blood. As expected, Night was enraged and was restrained by Night once again. However, Night didn't kill her. He only whispered in her ear that if he didn't guess wrongly, once the two of them absorbed the 2 beams of divine essence, they would definitely be persecuted after going through this process. To Ming's surprise, Night brought her under the 2 rays of divine splendor and used the heaven-defying, demonic reversal technique to help Ming absorbed the two rays of divine splendor into her body. After that, Night told Ming that if you really hate me that much, then you should live well and save your life to take revenge on me. Ming didn't understand what Night meant when Night slapped her stomach and killed the fetus in her stomach. Night said to the grief-stricken Ming again, "I'm sorry. I had no choice but to do this. I didn't have the confidence to escape with you. Only by letting them know that you and I are complete opposites can you have a chance to live. Remember, if you want to take revenge for Zheng and the dead fetus in your stomach, then you must live well." When they heard this, all of them were moved and couldn't help but look at each other. The demonic god Night was neither good nor evil. It was hard to tell if he was a good person or a bad person. It even made the three of them feel suffocated. Night really escaped from the sealed god's forbidden land? Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask. If he didn't escape, how could the current demonic god exist? Granny Yen nodded indifferently and said, "Indeed, he single-handedly fought his way out of the sealed god's forbidden land and escaped." The guards outside the forbidden land didn't expect to encounter such a ferocious desperado. However, at that time, Night's cultivation was not high enough to move unhindered in the immortal world. Immediately, there were countless experts who chased after him. One can well imagine what happened to him. Although he killed many of those who chased after him, he was forced to break all 4 of his limbs along the way. He had to use the blood escape art 4 times before he was able to escape. It could be said to be extremely tragic. Those who saw it with their own eyes were all shocked. Later on, when they recalled it, they would still be moved. However, his ability was indeed extraordinary. I can't help but admire him. So many people couldn't stop him and he escaped in the end. After that, the 6 clans led by the 6 ancient gods almost searched the entire divine world, but they couldn't find his hiding place. They also didn't know where he was hiding. Fortunately, under his ruthless actions, he made the right bet. Ming really managed to keep her life. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.